Good afternoon, everyone. It's September 5th. It's 1 p.m. I'm officially calling this Durham City Council work session to order. His Honor, the Mayor is out of the city on business in accordance with statute and our charter. As Mayor Pro Tem, I'll be assuming the gavel today. Let me say good afternoon to my honorable colleagues, to our staff, to all of you in the room with us today, and all of you watching on whatever platform you may be watching us. Thank you for being with us this Thursday afternoon. We are in session. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Williams has been granted an excused absence. Councilmember Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Caballero.
Here.
Councilmember Cook was also granted an excused absence. Councilmember Freeman.
Present.
Councilmember Rist.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Friends, it's not published on the agenda, but we have a ceremonial item today. And before I go to announcements by the council, I'm very excited to be able to read a proclamation for National Transportation Demand Management Week. That is National Transportation Demand Management Week. And we have our distinguished Director of Transportation, Sean Egan, who's here with us today. I'm going to ask if you would come to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Absolutely. You want to introduce who you have with you?
And this is Amani Johnson, our Transportation Demand Management Coordinator.
My former intern. Absolutely. Proclamation. Whereas Durham is a city that believes in the dignity and worth of each individual, regardless of color or creed, and supports building infrastructure to support a growing network for safe, reliable, efficient, and sustainable transportation and transportation options in Durham. And whereas the people of Durham celebrate and enjoy a very diverse community and multiple ways to access Durham's transportation network with the expansion of Go Durham routes, protected bike lanes, and flexible work policies. And whereas Durham continues to strive for the betterment of its people and to provide a direction for the future by creating and opening doors of opportunity and affording each individual equal educational opportunities, decent housing, gainful employment, and unbiased treatment, safe, reliable, and accessible transportation to provide connection to the people in places that matter most. And whereas the Durham community knows that inclusion, respect, and understanding of all those that work, play, worship, and live here promotes a community that we can be proud of. Now, therefore, I, Leonardo Williams, Mayor of the City of Durham, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim September 16th through the 20th, 2024, as National Transportation Demand Management Week in Durham and recommend its observance to all citizens. Witness my hand and the corporate seal of the City of Durham, North Carolina, this the 5th day of September, 2024, Leonardo Williams, Mayor. Let's hear it for him.
Yeah. So I want to thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and the full council and the administration for your support for this proclamation. We are so excited to celebrate Transportation Demand Management Week and share with the community all the work we are doing to advance sustainable transportation in Durham. We know that it is critical to provide more and better transportation choices in our community. So this summer, we've added 8 miles of bike lanes across the city. We've installed a new pedestrian signal with audible pedestrian signal, ADA capabilities at the intersection of Buchanan Boulevard and West Chapel Hill Street. And we've increased Go Durham service across North Durham, offering a direct crosstown connection to the Duke VA Hospital campus and 30-minute service all day to Northern and Riverside high schools just in time for back to school. So I'd now like to introduce our TDM coordinator, Amani Johnson, to share some information about the events planned for the week of the 16th.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to everyone for your commitment to make sure our TDM week for 2024 is a success. We begin TDM week with Make It Known Monday on September 16th. We will share what's on this proclamation and why it's important for TDM to become a part of our everyday environment as we transport ourselves to and from everywhere across Durham. September 17th is Track Your Trip Tuesday, and our team will announce our Cycle September and Biketober bike challenges for all to participate and for a chance to win some fun prizes. September 18th is Way to Go Wednesday, a social media challenge showing all the ways you can get around Durham using your favorite mode and a photo, of course. September 19th is Talk Micromobility Thursday. Our staff will be all across Durham showcasing our new micromobility devices that we have here in the city and handing out free ride cards for our new scooters and e-bikes that we have here in the city. To close out the week, Friday will be our Fast Track Friday, promoting our upcoming campaign for National Week Without Driving. So again, we want everyone to join us in this effort to ensure TDM Week can continue to be a success. And once again, we thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the great work you do. Let me say on behalf of the mayor, who's not here, and on behalf of the entire city, how grateful we are for the work that you do. I've said time and time again, one of the thresholds that any metropolis that wants to consider itself great has to cross. It has to eventually cross the threshold where the city is negotiable and navigable without a car, whether it's healthcare, education, or cultural attractions. In order to be great, you have to be able to do that. And our transportation folk, Madam Manager, are on the cutting edge here in Durham. I look forward to participating in No Driving Week. As I did last, I take the bus deliberately from time to time here in Durham. I'll be riding on that number 2. I see some of y'all out there. Shout out to my number 2 riders. So I encourage all of our residents and citizens listening today to make a plan, be intentional about using some of our other modes of transportation here in Durham that does not involve a car. You'd be surprised how our buses are clean, they have Wi-Fi, and the drivers are friendly. And we've got a lot of great trails in Durham as well, even as we continue to grow and buttress our infrastructure and our transportation efforts. So thank you so much. And thank you, Imani. Very proud of you. Former Miss NCCU and now working for our city. Thank you so much. Colleagues, thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to turn to announcements by our colleagues, and I will yield to Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just had a question for transportation staff. If they could just send us those dates so we know we can also participate, that would be great. Thank you. That's my only.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Yeah, just staying on theme. Previously have talked about the National Association of City and Transportation Officials, and they provide guidelines for high quality street design. I've worked a little bit with staff. I've worked with our city attorney's office to come up with some resolution language that would formalize those guidelines within the city. None of you have seen that language yet. I received it yesterday from the city attorney's office. I just wanted to get a temperature check to see if you would, as my colleagues, would be interested in putting that on the next work session, or if you'd like to see it before putting it on the subsequent work session. So just want to get a temperature check.
Councilmember, is this a resolution or well, I mean, yeah, you can send it to me and I have no problem with putting it on the work session.
Okay.
Colleagues? Without objection? Yeah.
Okay.
All right. No worries. Absolutely. Councilmember Freeman, good afternoon. Do you have any announcements?
Just a reminder, the town hall listening session this evening, 6 p.m. at Halton, and just following up, letting folks share their thoughts and concerns around the presentations we received August 22nd at the town hall, where there wasn't as much time to ask as many questions. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Riss, good afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Greetings, colleagues and staff and residents. Just got a couple, actually 2 things. So first thing I want to do is just kind of follow up on an item that I think it may have fallen through the cracks. We had a presentation from Quincy Hocutt from Trayburn a couple work sessions ago about changing the ordinance around deer. Yeah, deer. And so I talked to Deputy City Manager Ferguson about this. So he sent us a letter that you may have seen in your inbox. I think staff is wanting us to suggest we'd like them to bring this forward to us. So I want to see if there's a consensus here just to have the staff bring that item forward to us in one of our next meetings.
To be clear, are you asking for this to be a presentation at a work session or a work session?
I think it's I think it's bringing recommendations forward to us, right, at a meeting. Yeah.
Will Ferguson, Deputy
Yeah.
City Manager for Public Safety. So Mr. Hocutt has met with me after he came and spoke with council in August and was curious about next steps. We indicated to Mr. Hocutt that we would be in a position to bring something forward if we had consensus from council that they wanted to consider the item. We're in a position to do that if that's council's direction. If council is not interested in doing so, that is also acceptable to staff.
I'll be honest, I remember vaguely the presentation. I don't remember all the fine points. I know it's been a bit of a nuisance with deers. For me, I mean, I'm amenable to taking a look at it, but before I put it for me anyway, on work session, I think I'd like to see what staff is working on, what they're thinking by way of memo, or by way of email, for me, so.
So, I mean, I think the letter that Mr. Hocutt sent includes the sort of like suggested changes to the ordinance. I think it's in that letter. We can certainly send that around to all the council members. I think they're asking for a change in terms of like the buffer you have to have between archers and whatever houses or something like that, or, yeah.
They're requesting two changes to the ordinance. One is to take the minimum size of properties under which a hunt would be allowed down from 5 acres to 2 acres. They're requesting the buffer zone from a structure from which a bow could be released to be reduced from 250 feet down to 60 feet. The research we've done with the attorney's office, looking at other ordinances across the state, doesn't give us any concern about those requested changes. And that is what he included in the letter that he would like for council to consider. Our indication to him was that should council give us that direction, our analysis would be that we have no objection, given that we can't find any place where this law has really been problematic or these sorts of authorities have been problematic. That's what we would bring forward if council directed.
Again, yeah, I mean, that we're going to hear about 5 or 6 citizens matters today. My concern is that any number of citizens on any given day, any given work session, make recommendations, and they do not necessarily cross the threshold where they become an item on our work session. And to determine which ones do and which ones don't, we all have our different constituencies and different affinity groups, and I know that they're struggling with deer on their property in that area. But my hesitation is not that, and we may very well take action, but I think I'd like to confer with staff first rather than set the precedent where, your citizens matter. I can't guarantee every citizens matter is going to become a work session item. And I don't want to transmit that certain neighborhoods it would be for, and certain neighborhoods it won't, depending upon whether the council members are amenable to it. But I am committed to conferring with staff and following up on it. So that's I'll poll the house.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with it moving forward. I think part of sometimes citizens matters or really public comment. There isn't anything actionable. And so this seems like it is actionable, and it's not as easy a fix as, looking at the landscape and saying, oh yeah, the ordinance in other communities is this, we can match the ordinance, there hasn't been any problems. So I'm comfortable with moving it forward if others are. It seems pretty straightforward to me based on what staff analysis is, but.
Councilmember Baker?
Which ordinance would this be addressing? Just curious. Just like the development ordinance, or?
No, it's your general code of ordinances, and I don't have the reference in front of me. I don't know if Attorney Rayberg does, but it is an ordinance that originally existed that simply prohibited the poisoning of wildlife in the city, and it was determined in 2013 when a revision to that ordinance was brought forward that would also be the place to regulate hunting under certain circumstances within the city limits. So it's just your regular code of ordinances. And I'll, if we don't have the reference here, I'll get the reference for after work session and make sure council is available.
Okay. And do we, so UDO, there's a procedure for amending, there's a formalized procedure. Do we have a procedure? Is there a formalized procedure for folks who want to apply to amend any of our pieces in the code of ordinances?
Madam Manager? Oh,
Good afternoon, Councilmember Baker. So as you know, we do have a resident or public-driven text amendment process for UDO provisions, land use related ordinances. But for our general code of ordinances, we do not. There is not a process, and it's very rare that a municipality would have such a process. Generally, if the public wants a change in a local law, they should generate champions within the community for that change. Starting with their elected officials, sure, there may be some critical mass in the community that wants to see legislative change, but no, there is not a process for people just to say, I want code provision 14 dash whatever changed.
I'm comfortable putting this on the next work session. I also share some of the hesitation of the Mayor Pro Tem. I think this might be an interesting learning opportunity for us to see if there is a more formalized process, or if this is just the way that the best way and the best practice for amending the code of ordinances. So,
all right. I think we've crossed threshold, so you can go ahead and put it on the work session. Thank you.
And the
With-
city code provision is 6-3.
Thank you.
Durham
Thank you
City
for that.
Code.
All right. Were there any other
Yeah,
announcements?
sorry.
Go for
Long
it.
announcement there. So this was a little more fun than calling deer. So I just want to let everybody know that Durham-based independent records label Merge Records, which just celebrated their 35th anniversary, will be inducted into the NC Music Hall of Fame on October the 17th at a ceremony in Mooresville. That's a Thursday evening. The executive director of the Music Hall of Fame has reached out to the city of Durham, to the Durham Arts Council, and others to encourage us to bring a delegation to Mooresville to celebrate Merge Records and their being inducted. There's also going to be performances by H.C. McIntyre. I don't know H.C. McIntyre, one of the Merge Records performers, but also Anthony Hamilton and P. Pablo. So interesting stuff. So I encourage my colleagues, if you're interested, to join me in that celebration. Also, if I can take a moment of personal privilege, it's to say that the co-founder of Merge Records, Mac McCann, and I share quite an interesting history. His grandfather and my grandfather were law partners together way back in the day in Fort Lauderdale. So the McCann family and the Bird family, my mother's maiden name, have been connected for many, many years. So we're big fans of the McCanns and Merge Records, and I'll be there and encourage my colleagues to join me in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council member. Thank you, colleagues. Councilmember Cook is not with us today. She has an excused absence because of a death in her family, and we want to send the best wishes and love of our city to her and her family during this season of bereavement. All right, colleagues, with that, we're going to turn now to our executive leadership for priority items, and I will yield now to our city manager for any priority items. Good afternoon, Madam Manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of the Durham City Council. The city manager has no priority items for you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Manager. I'll turn now to our city attorney for any priority items she may have. Good afternoon, Councilor.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem. It's good to see you. Good to be with the council. City Attorney's Office has no priority items today.
And to our esteemed clerk, Madam Clerk, good afternoon. Any priority items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. The city clerk's office has no items.
Great. All right, no priority items from our executive leadership. Thank you to each of you for your work. I'll turn now to the reading of our administrative consent items today and the rest of our agenda. Any one of these items may be pulled by a member of the council or the public. Administrative consent items from our city clerk's office. Item number 1, Durham Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission appointment. Item 2, Durham City County Environmental Affairs Board appointment. Item 3, Mayor's Hispanic Latino Committee appointments. Item 4, Durham Housing Authority Board of Commissioners appointment. Under departmental items, under Budget and Management Services Department, item 5, contract with Cricket Forge to create historic neighborhood signs. Under Human Resources Department, item number 6, FY24 Logic Compensation Group Classification and Compensation Study Final Report. I don't want to pull it, but I look forward to reading every page of it. Twice. Public Works Department, item 7, contract BR 11D, Bridge Engineering Services for MBI Structures 2024. Item number 8, Utility Preliminary Engineering and Construction Agreement for Cornwallis Road, P5717. Item number 9, amendment number 3 to Carpenter Fletcher Road Improvements Preliminary Engineering Agreement, CSXT dot number 845869S.
Mayor Pro Tem, just to say, I don't want to pull that, just to say, we just heard a presentation about Transportation Demand Management Week and the importance of having good choices. This is one of a couple items, I think, on our agenda around bicycle facilities. So I just salute that work and happy to see that go forward.
Thank you, Councilmember. Agree with you. Item number 10, utility extension agreement with Welcome Venture Park LLC to serve the Welcome Venture Park Phase 2. Technology Solutions Department, item 11, amendment to contract with Securance LLC for Security Operations Center for Managed Services. Item 12, first amendment to the contract with Axon Enterprise, Inc. to increase digital evidence storage capacity for Durham Police Department. Under our Transportation Department, item 13, amendment number 2 to supplemental agreement number 2 with WSP USA, Inc. for transit asset and compliance management services. Item 14.
Actually, can you pull that one, 13?
13 is pulled. Item 14, interlocal agreement with Durham Public Schools, traffic signal design for proposed Durham School of the Arts. Item 15, supplemental agreement for design of bicycle facilities to TIP-BL-0028 with Mead and Hunt, Inc. Item 16, purchase of 7 replacement light transit vehicles for Go Durham Access. Under our Water Management Department, item number 17, Tar River Land Conservancy, Mount Harmony, Tract Watershed Protection Project, authorization to fund. Yes, ma'am. Item 17 is pulled. Item number 18, award of bid term contract for bulk water treatment plant chemicals to Brentag Mid-South, Inc. Item number 19, professional services contract award to Smith Gardner, Inc. for municipal landfill monitoring and design services. Item 20, award of bid term contract for bulk water treatment plant chemicals to Caris LLC. Item number 21, award of bid term contract for bulk water treatment plant chemicals to Penco, Inc. Item number 22, award of bid term contract for bulk water treatment plant chemicals to Univar Solutions USA, Inc. And today we have, colleagues, 4 presentations from Community Development Department. Item number 23, homelessness in the continuum of care in Durham, slated for 30 minutes. From our Finance Department, item number 24, fiscal year 2023 to 2024, fourth quarter financial report, slated for 20 minutes. City County Planning Department, synchronizing enrollment, capacity, and residential developments in Durham. Presentation by Durham Public Schools, slated for 30 minutes. And from our Transportation Department, presentation on Paratransit Improvement Services study, that is slated for 20 minutes. Under public hearings, City County Planning Department, item 27, consolidated item, Lions Farm Elementary School, major special use permit, transportation special use permit, and major site plan. Item 28, consolidated annexation, 5802 South Miami Boulevard, multifamily. Item number 29, consolidated annexation, Hurley Road. Item number 30, consolidated annexation, Farrington Road, multifamily. And then for citizens matters to be heard at 1 p.m., I have on virtually Jordan Backus, who will be with us on our virtual platform. And I have cards from Linda Sutton, Zachary Soroto. See Linda, another Linda Sutton. All right, that's a dupe. Janetta Alston and Katie Lundy Ross. We'll go in that order. That ends the reading of our agenda. Madam Manager, by my reckoning, I have items number 13 and 17 pulled. You concur? All right. We will start with our citizens matters to be heard at 1. Madam Clerk, if Jordan Backus is available, if you would make them hearable.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Backus is not online.
All right, thank you much. We will turn in-house. And I'd like to welcome Linda Sutton, if you're here. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. If you'll approach here, this lectern here, there's a button for you to push and you'll have 3 minutes to address us. Thank you for being with us. No worries. You're kind. Turn your microphone on if you would, please. Yeah, you can repeat that because I want the public to hear the compliment.
You did not hear my thank you. Looking at all of that, I think, oh, hats off to them. I'll be as brief as I can in 3 minutes. I've got just two items. One is a long-range plan and another is a short-range. I'm a retired resident. I came from Burlington. Like a lot of older folks, we come to live near our kids in the neighborhood. I love it. When I got here, I was so surprised that there was no leaf pickup in my neighborhood. I live in one of the lovely older neighborhoods of Durham. Burlington, for example, 3 times a year, they would come with that suck 'em up vacuum truck and pick up leaves. So I just would like to put this on in your thoughts, your committee work, or however you do this. But the good thing about it is it's a safety issue. You've got snakes, you've got insects, you've got mold, leaf mold for people who have allergies like me and others. So it's a convenience. In Burlington, all we did was rake our leaves to the edge of the property and the truck came and picked it up. Now I realize everything is what? Money. You all had a thing you put out for suggestions a couple of years back and I wrote that, but you know, you had a pot of money and I said, I have an idea for you to send and that's what we did. But anyway, it was not done. I realize that's a long range thing. It takes time and planning, but I think that would be a wonderful thing. Any questions on that or? Yeah, okay. My second item is an immediate item and it has to do with an ordinance. I'm not sure how this would be addressed, but it's a simple ordinance. I have the number here or I have some papers to give you, but in this 1 minute and a half that I have, I'm not sure we're going to do it. So let me just read it. I would like to see any kind of outdoor fires burning banned. Why? As you say here, the objective of the city council is to promote efficiency, consistency of health, safety, general welfare. Burning, the way I'm seeing several families and several neighborhoods do, is not in compliance with that. Also, nuisance fires, objectionable odors, byproducts of combustion, smoke, can be harmful to the residents. So whenever I've seen in several different cases, people burning, and I have one in my own neighborhood, I don't want this to be an issue of me versus him sort of thing. That's what I want the subjectivity of this out. I would like to see an objective ban on this kind of material. Right now, well, you can look at the ordinance, but what's being burned that's bothering me is making the neighborhood smoky. My husband has COPD. Other people in my neighborhoods do. My neighborhood does also, and it's just objectionable. And some people will it'll sort of all day long, it'll hover. I've actually walked down and around and, you know, by certain time in the afternoon, it's still going on.
So that's your time. Thank you so
Okay,
much for that.
thank
If you want to leave something with us, if you'll leave it with the clerk, if you have documents for us.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever you want us to see, if you just leave it with our clerk, she'll see that we get it.
C is the ordinance. Okay.
You just leave it with her. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate you. Thank you. Zachary Sirotto. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. My name is Zach Serrato. I live at 1909 Edgerton, 27703. I work at IBM and RTP, and I just bought my first home in Durham. My home backs up to a railroad crossing, and train whistles have shown to quickly become a disturbance, especially at odd hours of the night at 2 a.m. or as early as 7 a.m. Attempting to raise these concerns with different departments in the city has been unsuccessful, and I was informed by most departments that it's not a matter that they deal with. One of the departments had suggested I come here today to vocalize my concerns. Today, I'd like a moment of your time to talk about railroad quiet zones. Federal requirements state trains should blow their whistles when approaching a railroad crossing. However, this is only if the crossing is not equipped with adequate additional safety measures. There's a noise ordinance in Durham that also states that sound cannot exceed 60 decibels during the day and 50 at night, whereas train horns range as loud as 110 to 150 decibels. The FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration, also says exposure over 85 decibels leads to hearing damage, and these decibels are even more of a concern late at night since sound carries easier. If you look at the FRA's website, they also cite more in scholarly journals about the negative health effects from train whistle exposure. And on their website, they recommend quiet zones as an approach for local governments to decrease the negative impacts from train noise. There's also partial quiet zones that can be enacted at specific times, like at night. They're implemented based off of a safety index rating calculated for the crossing. And once the crossing is given an index, a notice of intent can be served to railroad authorities, asking them to cease blowing their train whistles at the crossing. The FRA also mentions there's no known increase in accidents at quiet zones, and quiet zones have been known to increase property value by at least 10% for nearby residences. Safety indices are provided based off engineering and non-engineering safety measures that are put in place. Non-engineering examples are photo enforcement or public education and awareness. Engineering examples are improvements that address the roadway, such as channelization devices like cones affixed to yellow lines or medians preventing drivers from crossing lanes. Wayside horns can also be implemented at railroad crossings, which direct the sound of train horns towards the crossing rather than spreading it through neighboring areas. There's 4-quadrant gates that can be installed, which is 4 arms instead of 2, and numerous other safety improvements. Since April, Raleigh has begun working on turning every railroad crossing into a quiet zone in their city limits. Apex has also implemented their first quiet zone downtown, and every railroad crossing by my hometown in Florida has them implemented as well. My ask is if Durham can be next. I'm not sure if there's opportunities to get involved with local advocacy groups or organizations that might already be fighting noise pollution in Durham, but I'm ultimately just looking for folks who can help here to look into this matter to hopefully implement quiet zones in the future for residents that live here and are dealing with this issue. Thank you, and I appreciate your time and consideration.
Serrato, thank you for being with us. And congratulations on the purchase of your home.
I appreciate it very much.
Sir. Jeanette Alston, good afternoon. Good to see you. Absolutely.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. I'm Janet Alston. JFK Towers is my residence, 4900 North Roxburgh Street, apartment 709, Durham 27704. I stand before you today concerned citizen and resident. For the last 3 months, JFK Towers has not had a manager or assistant manager. We're out there on our own. We have one elevator. The residents have been so excited because they were doing work on the elevators that they thought we were getting new elevators as promised. They put new floors in the elevators, new lights, and put new paneling on the 3 walls. And they're excited about that. The elevators have not been fixed. And right now today, 1 elevator working for 7 floors. Also, it was brought to my attention, and let me say it like this. You all agreed for Northern to be built next door. You all did all the research for it to be built next door, but no concern for JFK Towers. How many little Becky Sues are walking across JFK Towers every Monday through Friday? You know that's a dangerous place. How many rapes have happened at JFK Tower? Northern is just a rock throw away. Are we concerned? Do you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews that goes to Northern? How many has some child at Northern High School? But I still can't get y'all to come out there to see about this. Also, when HUD came through, the district manager showed up and she tried to have Senator Woodard arrested for being a guest of mine. Also, the Indy, Sarah, right? Mary. Tried to have her arrested as well as N&O for being guests of mine. But HUD showed up anyway. She showed them the good side of JFK. But soon as she left, I said, okay, now let me show you my side. Yeah, we knocked on 226 and we knocked on 222. That floor is under construction. Guess what? I opened the door 222. The drug dealer came out of the kitchen. He was cooking something to eat. And he asked us, what you want? Thank you.
Thank you so
But
much.
please consider your children. You don't care about us? Consider the children next door.
Thank you for being with us. Awesome. Katie Lindy Ross. Mhm. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Please help that lady. That's very moving what she's saying. Okay, so I'm talking on a topic that Katie Ross, Bahama, that I have talked about before in conjunction with specific projects. But in general, I'd like to talk about blasting and some of the terrible harm that is being done. You all know about the Junction Road situation where it's now coming to 2 years since those people's 10 residents on Junction Road, their wells have been damaged and are not usable because of blasting of the surrounding developments. They're not in the city limits, but the projects that are causing the trouble are, and they're projects that you all have approved. And that's where I see the line of responsibility. And I sincerely believe that all of you sitting here that I'm looking at and Ms. Cook care about this and want to help. The mayor has just casually stated, I'll mention it to the county. That is not adequate and it's not fair to these people. What I am suggesting is that because I do believe that the people I'm looking at now, and that includes you, Mr. Middleton, because we had a very brief conversation about this once. You asked me to come and talk to you about it. I didn't, and I apologize. But I do think you care about these people. But the problem is you don't know exactly what you can do. And so that's why I propose having at one of your sessions, a symposium, a conference, a gathering, whatever you want to call it, of appropriate experts in 2 areas of the field. One, independent experts, not the building industry's experts on blasting and what needs to be done to make it safe when it shouldn't be done. And whether what's going on here is appropriate in some of these specific cases. But secondly, the remedies. Why aren't the developers and the blasting companies being held responsible for what they're doing? Why haven't they repaired the damage that they have done in over 2 years? Junction Road is not the only victims, but they're the most egregious one and the one that's been going on as long as I know. Why are not the developers and the people profiting off of these developments and this mass grading? Why aren't they being held immediately responsible and making the remedies for these people and repairing their wells? You know, I'm a retired attorney. I know that their insurance companies are telling them not to accept responsibility because the insurance companies and the defense attorneys know that it's more expensive to get an attorney to try to bring a lawsuit to get private remedy for this than it is to fix your well, and you won't get your attorney fees back. So that's what I would like you to look at, and maybe just consider that having some kind of a presentation, question, answer, something that you will learn what possible remedies are under our current law, or if we need to, with this upcoming UDO, maybe we need a new ordinance to help make those people responsible. So that's what I have to say today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us, for coming out today. And Madam Clerk, has Jordan Backus showed up in queue?
No, Mr. Backus is not online.
All right, then we have exhausted all of our citizens matters for the day. We will, colleagues, we have 4 presentations. We have 2 pulled items. I want to, and we've got some guests. Do you think, those of you that have pulled items, how extensive do you think your treatments will be? Because if they're really substantive, I'm going to go ahead with the presentations. But if you think you can dispense of them with some, I have item number 13 was pulled by, I believe, Councilmember Riss, and item 17 by Councilmember Caballero. Do you think we can dispense of them? Let's go with that then. Let's do our pulled items, and then we'll get to our presentations. We're 20 minutes shy of 2 p.m., so we're not doing bad on time. Now, amendment number 2, the supplemental agreement number 2 with WSP USA Inc. for transit asset and compliance management services. Councilmember Riss, I yield to you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Hey, thanks, Mr. Reed. Thanks for being here. So I know this is a lot about compliance stuff with the Federal Transit Administration, right? And I understand the focus of this is adding a task to our current work order with this consultant to add, to make sure we're compliant with the requirements of FTA regarding disadvantaged business enterprises. And so I guess my question here is, because we've had several conversations here on the council about DBEs and our broader policy to ensure appropriate use of disadvantaged business enterprises. So I'm just kind of curious, what's going on here? Are we worried that we're not compliant? I mean, what's the gist of this one here?
So good afternoon. I'm Sean Egan, the Director of Transportation for the city. Every 3 years, the Federal Transit Administration conducts a review of all of our compliance, all of our policies and procedures. We had identified some opportunities for improvement in our compliance procedures, particularly related to disadvantaged business enterprise. In previous years, we had been meeting our DBE goals every year because we set a very low bar for those goals. We were at 3% participation for DBE firms. We were exceeding the goal. And so as part of our work with the consultant, we wanted to look at other FTA recipients, other cities and transit agencies to see how can we be more ambitious with this goal and what work can we do and what examples can we point to really be as ambitious as possible. And so through that and then through the FTA process, when you change your goal, you have to provide extensive research and documentation to support that change. So we're recommending a 20% goal rather than 3% going forward. But there's significant additional documentation. FTA wants you to demonstrate that it is reasonable for you to be able to accomplish this. What other recipients can you point to who have set an ambitious goal and achieved an ambitious goal? And how will you make sure that you're providing all of the monitoring of your contractors and subcontractors to be able to coordinate this? So we want to make sure that we can satisfy all of the FTA's requirements for documentation and research because they are skeptical that we can achieve such an ambitious goal, but I'm convinced that we can achieve that goal.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the clarification. And I do deeply appreciate the willingness to set aggressive goals, right? And this is kind of the thing we talked about earlier on the council is that, just setting a low bar, setting a low goal, that's not, I like being aggressive. So I really appreciate that. I guess my other question would be, in setting an aggressive goal, what kind of support will you all need from the rest of the city to make sure you can achieve those goals? Because I'm sure part of this is not only identifying a list of people, minority or disadvantaged business enterprises on a list, but it's also making sure that list is like a robust list. And we've got a pipeline of firms that are coming forward that can be potential contractors. So what other help do you need to make sure you can achieve those aggressive goals?
So the consultant support that is on the agenda today is critical for us to be able to do that. But we're also looking at our staff capacity and the needs that we have to take on more ambitious goals, what the adequacy of our current staff capacity is. And we'll be addressing that through the upcoming budget process, our findings and recommendations coming out of that. But staff capacity was definitely an area of concern within the review that we received, that there needed to be sufficient staff capacity to manage compliance with all of these programs, particularly with very ambitious goals being set.
And what about other departments in the city, potentially like OEWD? Is that part of the equation as well, or what's the role that your colleagues may play?
So we work with the Equal Business Opportunity team and the finance department to make sure that we're setting participation goals for all of our contracting opportunities. And we work with audit services, for example, to make sure that we have strong policies and procedures and a compliance framework. So there will be support required from other departments for us to achieve these more ambitious goals. But I think they're consistent with the city manager's direction around how to approach this work.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. All right, colleagues, we'll turn now to item 17, Tar River Land Conservancy, Mount Harmony Tract Watershed Protection Project, authorization to fund. And this was pulled by Councilmember Caballero, and I'll yield to you now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good to see you. Really quick, I just wanted to have I thank Manager Page because she helped break it down for me. This is separate than any kind of, a few years ago, the city started funding a separate fund for open space designation, and we got an open space planner. And I just wanted to have a clearer understanding. This is a completely separate pot of money through water management, and it's just, so that's it. That's my question.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, Don Greeley, Water Management. Yes, this is a separate program altogether. This is for protection of our drinking water supplies. So it's our watershed protection plan for our drinking water supplies specifically.
Thank you. And this is in the memo, it shows that other counties and other municipal governments also go in with these types of land purchases.
Yeah, it's very frequent that they participate in projects like this.
Thank you. That's it. That's my question. I just wanted to bring it up because we have two, we're doing a really good job along with the county around land protection. We hear a lot, especially when we hear about development cases and protection of our watershed, and just highlighting the really deep and extensive work that water management's done along with other municipalities and counties around that watershed protection. And additionally, we have a separate program along with the county to identify open space purchases. And we also now have an open space planner in Parks and Rec. And so I'm just naming all of these things as ways that the city is doing exactly what many of our residents ask us to do, which is to identify where we can protect critical watershed throughout Durham County. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, for highlighting that. And thank you, Director Greeley. Sure, absolutely. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilmember Caballero bringing that up. Is there any way that these funds can be used to protect the Falls Lake, even though it's in Raleigh's watershed?
Well, both of our water supplies are in the Falls Lake watershed.
Okay.
So any projects that we participate in to protect our watershed basically automatically protects Falls Lake as well.
Falls and Jordan?
No, that's a separate watershed.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, anyone else? Thank you, Director. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, we turn now to our presentations. I'm going to exercise some gavel prerogative. Since we have our friends from outside of our orbit from Durham Public Schools, I'm going to make our first presentation if I can find them. Yeah, see them. Got you. We're going to do item number 25, Synchronizing Enrollment, Capacity, and Residential Development in Durham, presentation by our friends from Durham Public. Oh, okay.
My apologies. Our friends from Durham Public Schools are not all here. And so if we could kind of wait, they were trying to game plan with your agenda. So our apologies.
Sure. Well, would you tell them I tried to extend them a courtesy? All right.
They'll be here shortly. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, then we'll start with item 23, Homelessness in the Continuum of Care in Durham. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. Reginald J. Johnson, Director of the Community Development Department. If you may recall, during the budget process last spring, City Council requested a deep dive into the homelessness system and the city's role. And we asked that we schedule it sometime in the fall. Well, this is that presentation. And so we want to spend a few moments with you discussing the homeless system and the continuum of care. And I'll turn it over to Colin Davis, who serves as our homeless system manager for the city of Durham. Colin Davis.
1 second.
Feel free to ask me a question.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, and City Manager. Colin Davis, City of Durham Community Development Department Manager of the Homeless System. I'm going to present to you today just an update on homelessness in Durham and sort of an overview of the system. I apologize to those of you who were on council in January of 2023. There are some slides that are similar to that because the homeless system, there's some things that are static and some things do change. And we're always having something going on. So we're going to go over the homeless system, the role of the city in the homeless system, public funding sources that help us to pay for all the services that we do.
Mr. Davis, while they're queuing that up, and this also came before the joint city county committee, didn't it? Also
In December, there was a brief piece that we did a little bit of an update on that, as well as some things that we'd requested from city and county to assist in funding. Good memory. So we'll start off with an overview of the homeless system. Starting off, HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, as we affectionately call HUD, mandates that every jurisdiction has what's considered a continuum of care. And this continuum of care, our COC, is made up of homeless service providers. It's made up of law enforcement, hospitals, education. It's supposed to be made up of anybody who has any intersection with households experiencing homelessness. And we have the Homeless Services Advisory Committee, which is our governing board of our continuum of care. When you look at what HUD requires your continuum of care to be made up of, just about everybody who is supposed to be a member of your continuum of care is also a member of our Homeless Services Advisory Committee. So we kind of fill two roles in both places. The Homeless Services Advisory Committee, or HSAC, has three standing committees: the Executive Committee, the Policy and Planning Committee, and Performance Management. Executive Committee is designed to set up the HSAC meetings and appoint chairs to the subcommittees. Policy and Planning works and sets up funding priorities. So HUD releases an annual notice of funding opportunities. During that competition, the Policy and Planning Committee will make recommendations in terms of should a bonus project be prioritized for rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing or transitional housing or any of the other eligible pieces based on data and input that we have. So we're currently in our annual continuum of care funding cycle, and the priority for bonus projects this year is permanent supportive housing. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then the Performance Management Committee is the group who goes out and is evaluating whether or not the programs in our homeless system are performing in the ways that we expect them to perform and meeting the benchmarks that are established by the continuum of care. So we will set benchmarks at 30% of one type of program should exit to permanent housing. And performance management goes back and says, all right, are these groups hitting those benchmarks? If not, you go through a corrective action plan or a performance improvement plan and sort of what do we need to do to fix this? Is this an issue that agency is not doing well, or are there systemic things that are in the way? Are there policies in the way? And if there's policies in the way, then policy and planning goes back and says, let's make some adjustments to the policies and see if we can help turn the ship around. So we have a lot of definitions that you'll hear us talk about. So I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. Coordinated entry, that is our front door. Anybody experiencing homelessness in Durham, and I always say experiencing homelessness because people are not homeless. People are experiencing homelessness. Being homeless is lack of housing. So people experiencing homelessness is an important thing to delineate, that people themselves are not homeless. They're just experiencing a temporary loss of housing. So front door coordinated entry folks come there looking for assistance. They go through a prioritization process and we try to divert people from the homeless system and may get them to connect with family in other areas to exit homelessness. If that's not an option, putting them on a wait list or trying to get into a shelter bed if a shelter bed is available. Generally speaking, the shelter beds in Durham are lacking in terms of the numbers of people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So even if all the shelter beds are full, there are still a large number of people who will be without an emergency shelter. Diversion, that's getting people to other housing options. Emergency shelter is, we've got 2 emergency shelters in our homeless system, Families Moving Forward and Urban Ministries are our 2 emergency shelters. And they work with a 30-day plan to try and get people to permanent housing. That 30 days can be extended depending on what's happening and folks moving towards permanent housing goals. We are required by HUD to track our data, track our outcomes, and be able to report back on successes. And we use a homeless management information system, otherwise known as the HMIS. Permanent supportive housing. You heard me talk about this a moment ago. This is something that is an intervention that is designed for people who are chronically homeless, meeting HUD's definition of chronically homeless, meaning having a disabling condition and being homeless for 12 months or more continuously, or 4 or more episodes of homelessness in the last 3 years that add up to 12 months. So to enter this program, you have to have a documentation of a disabling condition from a licensed medical provider in that area of expertise, and housing history documentation showing that you are chronically homeless and showing your housing history and where those breaks in housing have been. Rapid rehousing is a short to medium term intervention where there's supportive services and up to 24 months of financial assistance. The goal is households moving into a rapid rehousing program with those supportive services will be able to move on and sustain that rent at the end of 24 months, ideally a lot shorter. Ideally, we don't want to go 24 months because it's very expensive. There's not a lot of money in those programs. So it can get eaten up pretty quickly if you have to go full 24 months. Street outreach, this is our group of providers that currently the city of Durham is in a joint partnership with the county to fund Housing for New Hope for an unsheltered coordinating agency. They provide our street outreach and canvassing of campsites and work with those in Durham who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness to provide services and try and get them connected. It's just a brief diagram of how the homeless system works. So you see our little stick figure here who calls entry point, and that little stick figure could come from street outreach going to entry point. Everything funnels through entry point, and we'll either go through a diversion, which is our first option because it's oftentimes the least expensive way of getting people out of homelessness is to reconnect them with family or friends. And that may be a bus ticket or a train to South Carolina to go live with a grandmother who says they can stay. Then the next option is, okay, we've got to look at emergency shelter and permanent housing, and there's steps to go through that. And then once you're in shelter or even unsheltered, You can go over here through permanent housing, which is rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, other housing programs, which include housing choice vouchers. Housing choice vouchers do not come with supportive services, and they don't come with additional money. So when you have a housing choice voucher for a household experiencing homelessness, we need to make sure that that household doesn't need additional supportive services and they have adequate income to be able to pay the water bill and electric bill and other costs associated with rental housing above the rent cost to avoid lease violations that could result in an eviction. So the city has a couple roles in the homeless system. So the city of Durham does operate as the lead agency for the Durham Continuum of Care. And in that role, we coordinate the HSAC meetings. We coordinate and write the annual application to HUD for the NOFO, as well as the state ESG application. We just submitted the state ESG application, which is Emergency Solutions Grant, for roughly $170,000. And we will be submitting the HUD COC NOFO later this fall when it's due. We also have to do the point in time count, and we serve as the coordinated entry administrator to ensure that we've got equitable policies and procedures to ensure that people are treated fairly and we're following our guidelines. And from an equity lens, we as a homeless system do know that people of color are disproportionately overrepresented in the homeless system. Roughly 77% of people experiencing homelessness are people of color. We have seen that throughout our system, 75 to 77% of people served through every different thing happen to be people of color. So we are operating at equity, which is an incredible thing to do because it's a big piece that HUD is trying to solve across the country. And we in Durham have figured out how to make sure that we're not overrepresenting one group over another throughout the system, which a lot of groups you'll see, particularly in permanent supportive housing programs, tend to be disproportionately made up more of white people versus people of color. The city also serves as a funder, and we as a city contribute money to coordinated entry, landlord engagement, street outreach, the HMIS lead emergency shelter operations for White Flag, as well as rapid rehousing. We do have more public funding coming in. So this is where our dedicated housing funds go. Our dedicated housing funds, in terms of what we're funding, $200,000 match to the state, to HUD's COC, HUD's ESG funds, excuse me, as well as the city's half of the unsheltered coordinating agency, coordinated entry with diversion of $477,500. The HMIS is $78,000. The HUD NOFO contributes $55,000 to that. And we pay for this data and all the associated training and staff with that so that it's not a cost passed on to our service providers. Landlord engagement is $150,000 a year, and our White Flag shelter is about $190,000 a year. Durham County does contribute to the homeless system, and we're working with them to get specific dollars of how much money is going to what shelters. At this point, $215,000 is their half of the unsheltered coordinating agency, and they are part of our coordinated entry program that's in partnership with Volunteers of America. So they provide office space in kind to the VOA staff, as well as to DSS staff to be part of that team. Durham County is also providing money to emergency shelters in the county. Talked a little bit about the Emergency Solutions Grant from the state. We as a city are an entitlement jurisdiction, and we receive approximately $175,000 for that pot of money. We use that $175,000 plus $200,000 match, and that's used for rapid rehousing households that are experiencing homelessness. We use $300,000 of our community development block grant, which is our public services allocation. We can't exceed 15% of that for this. And this is, we provide supportive services in emergency shelters, case managers, and some case managers in the permanent supportive housing program. These funds go out via competitive RFP on a regular basis, and we enter into a multi-year contract to ensure services
are able to continue. Housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, living with AIDS, is HOPWA. This is not a homeless-only project. There are preferences for people who are experiencing homelessness in HOPWA. However, HOPWA is eligible to anybody under 80% AMI and living with HIV or AIDS. And we have to serve the 5-county EMSA, which includes Chatham, Durham, Granville, Orange, and Person counties. And we partner with Department of Social Services as well as Central Piedmont Community Action to make the HOPWA program work. The HUD COC funding, we're in the NOFO competition now. Our renewal amount for the 23-24 year was a little over $2 million, and it broke out for about $900,000 for permanent supportive housing, about $1 million for rapid rehousing. Out of that $1 million of rapid rehousing, $525,000 was targeted for households experiencing or trying to flee intimate partner violence, or DV. And there's money associated with that in this year's NOFO as well for a bonus project for additional money to help households fleeing domestic violence. Priority through this is given to renewal projects. And the reason for that is people are often in these projects and you can't just strip the funding away and not have people fall off a cliff. So renewal projects do get prioritized above new projects unless there's a plan to reallocate the funds, and which we have done that a few times. This is a year where money is being reallocated. So we expect some new projects to come online during calendar year 2025. This is how our state ESG money has been spent in the 2023 competition and the 2024 competition. This year, we're recommending that $64,000 be spent on emergency shelter and $105,000 being spent on rapid rehousing, with a priority for households with children, i.e. families, are predominantly going to be funded with this, with a set aside to prioritize families. This is our total dollar. City of Durham with our entitlements is about 2.8 million, and our COC grant of 2 million, state ESG. So just shy of $5 million is our total operating budget in the homeless system. That does not include funding from the county, and it does not include staff salaries. So this is the money that's going out to actually do the direct work and pay for the supportive services that are required. We look at this, this was put together for the week of August 19th when it was submitted. We had about 35 families reporting unsheltered homelessness, as well as 55 single adults reporting unsheltered homelessness, waiting to get into a shelter bed. There are 50 emergency shelter beds for men, 15 shelter beds for women, and 28 bedrooms for families in all of Durham. That's our homeless system's emergency shelter capacity. So right there, you've got more than our system can handle. Go ahead.
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. We have 50 beds for single men experiencing homelessness, 15 beds for single women experiencing homelessness, and 28 bedrooms for families experiencing homelessness between our two shelters.
Mr. Chancellor, one question related to that.
Sure.
I heard recently from having a conversation with someone about like the waiting list at Urban Ministries. Can you confirm how many people currently, or at least the latest data you've seen, are on the waiting list for getting into the shelter?
This is these numbers here, this 35 and 55 is about average. It's not too far outside the realm of the normal week. So and that waiting list changes, and then it's prioritized based on need and a whole lot of things. So you might be at the top of the list one day, and somebody may call and they're more vulnerable, and you might drop down.
So these numbers, essentially, this reflects individuals or families that essentially
are unsheltered and waiting for a shelter bed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This is on top of the beds being full.
Basically, the 35 and the 55, whether they go up or down, that's our wait list. Give or take.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
it changes weekly, a little bit here and there, but for the most part, there's not wild swings. Sometimes we do see a little bit higher peaks at the end of a school year, and then you'll see a bigger peak like right after the holidays. Families tend to allow folks to stay, especially if kids are involved, until the school year ends, and then it's like you can't stay anymore, you got to go. And then people will tend to allow people to double up or triple up through a holiday season, and then in January, we'll see some numbers go up. So there's kind of a natural flow to the system.
Can you remind me which shelters serve families and which serve single adults? I think Urban Ministries is only single adults, correct? Yeah.
So Urban Ministries serves singles and families. They only have 8 rooms for families. So they're the only singles provider in our continuum of care. Then we've got the Families Moving Forward, which has 21 bedrooms there for families. And we've got, if you look down, we've started tracking folks who are exited from shelter for a variety of reasons and are calling the next day to get back into shelter. So it could be they stayed out too late, they got into an argument, any number of reasons that they were exited from the program and want to get back into the shelter. So we are working on doing that. We are seeing an average of about 3 households a week that are entering the homeless system from the rescue mission. The rescue mission is not part of the Durham's continuum of care. They operate independently and separate. And they do bring people in from around the state, outside the state, across the country. People do come, and people who don't choose to not stay there or don't stay for a variety of reasons will often exit and become homeless in Durham. And we're seeing about an average of 3 new people a week coming in through that system. We do have people calling and trying to relocate from other counties. That tends to be about 5 calls a week of folks trying to come from other areas and looking for housing in Durham. And we are tracking people coming from other countries who are either showing up. We do have people who report being put on an airplane and coming to RDU, and here's a family of 10 people who started in El Salvador and now they're here and need housing, and trying to work with that, or other foreign countries. It's not just Latin countries. Questions on this?
Do you want questions at the end or do you want them in?
It's up to you. I'll defer to whatever you're comfortable
Okay,
with.
I'll wait because we're just 2 more slides. Yeah, because I have a lot. Thanks.
Okay. This is just our look at our point in time count. And keep in mind, our point in time count is kind of like a checkbook. If you go look at your bank account today, you'll see a certain dollar amount in your bank today. But that dollar amount is not the same dollar amount of all the money that comes in and out over the course of a year. So the point in time count is the number of people we counted experiencing homelessness on one particular night in January. So this is our historical trend of people experiencing homelessness in Durham. And you can see a general increase from 2016 to 2024 of 354 to 405. We did have the outlier year of 2022. That was during COVID. We had a lot more shelter beds because we had a lot of federal COVID money coming in. So we had a lot of extra space that we were trying to fill shelter beds. And that's where you'll see a big jump in our emergency shelter that year. Was 286 people experiencing homelessness that were in emergency shelter on that particular night. This is looking at exits to permanent housing by type of activity. So street outreach, this is going straight from unsheltered housing to permanent housing. 23% of people that are engaged in street outreach. Street outreach's goal is not to go straight to permanent housing. The goal is to get you unsheltered. So there's another matrix that we also look at for street outreach, and that's what we call exits to positive housing destinations. And an exit to positive destination for somebody experiencing unsheltered homelessness could be entry into an emergency shelter. It could be entry into transitional housing. It could be getting connected to a temporary stay to deal with a psychiatric illness at a hospital. So there are positive outcomes from unsheltered homelessness. We also look at the same thing. we look at the permanent housing so that we can compare apples to apples between street outreach and our emergency shelter, transitional housing, and rapid rehousing projects. And you'll see that the trend line from 2018 to now has been going down. Well, what's happened since 2018? Housing prices have gone up. Landlords and housing tenant selection criteria has changed over that time. The number of housing vouchers being issued has decreased because we don't have as many vouchers that are freely available. They're tied up at this point with folks. So it's getting harder and harder to get very, very low income households with high barriers into permanent housing from any location. So we're down to about 34%. Challenges. There's lots of challenges. We'll talk about this. So one of the things we've seen is previous prioritization policies. This is prioritization policies that the homeless system had in place. For several years, we were prioritizing the highest barrier, hardest to serve households for issues, for moving into permanent housing. By doing that, we inadvertently would put people into a housing choice voucher who needed extensive supportive services and didn't have money to pay the water bill, and that didn't work out well. So we are now in the process of revising all of these policies and procedures and really trying to be much more intentional and matching housing need with the housing available and matching it to the household experiencing homelessness with the appropriate services and the appropriate intervention at the most appropriate time as quickly as possible. We have also seen landlords changing their tenant selection criteria because they want to reduce their chances of having to go to court for evictions because it's expensive and time consuming. So we are dealing with that piece as well. We did lose 20 emergency housing vouchers during COVID. The HUD did give Durham 68 emergency housing vouchers. We were only able to use 48 of them. 10 households received vouchers, but were not able to find landlords willing to accept those vouchers and get them under lease before the time limit ran out. And the housing authority was unable to issue the additional 10 before the deadline ran out due to staff shortages. There was too short staff to be able to pull it all off. We also don't have enough supportive services to line up with some of the high barrier needs that some of our households have to support them in housing on their own. As we talked about emergency shelter, there's limited beds for families and for families. We don't have a shelter system for couples. If you're a couple and experiencing unsheltered homelessness and living in your car, you both might want to go to shelter, but there's no guarantee that a female bed and a male bed are going to open at the exact same time and you're going to be in the shelter at the same time. So there's some times where a male bed might open and there's not one for the partner, and the male will choose, I'm not going because she can't go. So you sort of end up in a cycle of remaining homeless to be with the partner because we don't have that system in place. We do have people who are medically fragile, and there isn't a specific shelter for that group of folks who are too sick to go to an emergency shelter, but they're too healthy to stay in a hospital. And there's another group who might need to go to an assisted living facility, but they don't want to go to assisted living because they don't want to use their money to pay for it. So we've got that other group of people who don't want to spend their money on housing that sort of end up in this gray zone, as we'll call it, of what to do and how to solve that. And we always do in the homeless system by HUD, we are required to accept and work with people who have service animals. However, we do not have places for people to go with pets. So if your pet is a pet, we don't have a place for that. But if it's a service animal, we will work with those. So questions, and it's a lot of information and there's a whole lot more that we could go into, but on a high level, this is kind of where we are today.
Colin, thank you very much. This is an excellent primer for some of us and reminder for others. Excellent presentation. Thank you. All right, colleagues, I know some of you were deferring. Now's the time. Councilmember Caballero, please.
Thank you. Good to see you, Colin. So I'll have several questions. and some of it's going to be kind of historic as far as going back to a few years, and current. So I guess one question, and I'd heard this, we were providing tents for folks if they needed it. And I was just curious if we're still doing that.
The homeless system itself was not providing tents.
Okay.
HART was providing tents to people who were experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And we've put a pause on that until we can figure out a policy to ensure that we don't have encampments getting out of control. It's a delicate balance, right? So we're in the process of working through that.
When can we expect, like, what's the timeline on a policy?
We're working on, we've talked about it as the homeless team. I need to get with Ryan and his team. I've talked to NIS about sort of their take, and then we need to take it to we have a lived experience work group as part of the Homeless Services Advisory Committee. We want to get their take on it and run it through the Homeless Services Advisory Committee, because it's not just a policy that will impact city or city departments. It's something that would affect any continuum of care member who would want to distribute tents. So we want to make sure that we look at it in a variety of ways and also make sure it dovetails. We don't create conflict or challenges with the encampment response policy either.
Okay. And then I guess my thing is, or my next question is, if folks, we have these long wait lists, and I'm assuming that when the folks who are on these wait lists we know that they're there because they called in. This isn't like really the only accurate or more accurate time we get is when we do our point in time count. Because if you haven't called in and you're unsheltered, then we don't necessarily know you're there.
Correct.
Okay. So we could anticipate that our numbers are higher.
Over the course of the year, when we look at our longitudinal system analysis, it's about 4 times the pit count of the number of people who come through the system over the course of a year. About 12 to 1,500 come through over the course of the year. If you look at the number of calls that Entry Point Durham gets, our coordinated entry system, for the year that ended June 30th, 2024, they had 3,491 calls. Those are unique people.
Right.
And not calls, people. 3,491 people were impacted by homelessness or at risk of homelessness, calling, seeking assistance. So that's our total number, but that's not, all of those are not unsheltered when they call.
Right.
Some are, hey, I got an eviction notice and I need to be out shortly. Some of those are, I'm in shelter. Some of those are the out of county. I'm looking to relocate because Durham's the place to be. I don't want to be wherever I am.
Okay, thank you. And then a few years ago, maybe it was in 2019, there was the city did an analysis of how many permanent supportive units we were going to need, and we were already at a deficit then. What is the count today, and have we done that comparison and analysis?
We've not done an updated analysis on that. We have not brought any additional permanent supportive housing units online since then. So the deficit would have grown.
And then I guess my question would be, when can we anticipate that analysis being done?
We have to look and figure out where it would fit in the time frame.
Okay.
There's a lot of competing priorities. So it's one that we need to look at in terms of our gaps analysis. And what we're trying to do is streamline our gaps analysis so that we can pull these reports much quicker and easier. And I think there's an easier way of doing that analysis, because the analysis that you're referring to was done by a Duke grad student who spent a semester doing that kind of research that we just don't have the bandwidth and the time to do. We can arrive at close enough for planning purposes through other ways that might be able to streamline that process.
Then my next question is kind of similar. I feel like in 2018, and now it could have also been 2019, it was certainly pre-pandemic, we also got an update from community development in general around a plan to decrease at the time, it was mostly single men. That was the identified population. I know we've seen a lot of families that are now unsheltered, those numbers had grown, but in that moment, that was the population that we were seeing most frequently. And there was a plan to pretty much eradicate or very aggressively decrease that number. Have we done an analysis back to that? Maybe staff can help me out here because I remember it was 2018 or 2019 that we got that update. And so just again, curious, have we kind of done that backwards look to see, you know, what was happening then? Have we met any of those goals? Is the landscape just completely different?
Great question. So I'm not familiar with that study. I think that predated me. So that must have been early, because I started with the city in October of 2019. So I'd have to go find.
And Wanda wouldn't have been made. Okay, I'm gonna have to go into.
So I'll have to see if I can find that.
Okay.
And I would say at this point, that data is really old and everything has changed. And I mean, housing prices in 2018 to now are radically different. And the numbers of people experiencing homelessness, as we looked at the slide on the point in time count, is, 100 people a night higher. So I think it's good to go back and look and say, where are we now? And how are we moving forward on these? And we are making adjustments in our policies and procedures of how we move people through the system. It's expensive. And we've got about $5 million a year.
Yeah.
It's the same $5 million. So if we want to do another permanent supportive housing program, are we going to cannibalize landlord engagement? What program gets cannibalized to do something else? And until we can find and identify other funding sources that are ongoing and sustainable, because with the homeless system, it's not a one-time capital cost. It's not like building a building where it's, here, you build the building and it's done. Well, then somebody's got to figure out how to keep it running on the ongoing piece. But it's, how do you sustain the supportive services? How do you sustain the rent subsidies on the go forward?
Thank you. And then, so my last question is around white flag nights. How many of those do we typically operate, and what are y'all thinking about this year? And do you all feel like it's sufficient?
We're doing white flag differently this year. We had been doing white flag because during COVID, we did white flag using motels for congregate social distancing. We did have a socially distanced congregate shelter for white flag in 2021, 2022 at Trinity United Methodist. And after that, the church said, this isn't going to work for us anymore. Open Table Ministry is still our white flag provider. Last year, we had 10 motel rooms. And the reason we had to do that is because now that travel and everything is back up, motels couldn't guarantee that we could call up with 24 hours or 48 hours notice and say, hey, we need 25 rooms and have them available. So we kind of had to rent 10 rooms for the whole cold weather season. And that's what the budget allowed. And we sort of moved in and had a prioritization for who would go in. And the goal was to move people out. And it was, the easier way to look at it is we expanded emergency shelter by 10 bedrooms, and we prioritized 6 rooms for families and 4 rooms for singles. And those singles could be doubled up. So we did that. This year, the plan is to use a church that has agreed to work with Open Table Ministry to do a congregate shelter, because we're out of the COVID piece. So we're going to be able to serve way more than the 10 and be able to do that. So we're in the process of building the infrastructure for that. And it'll be stood up only on the nights that are the white flag nights, or for, if it's projected, let's say a Tuesday to a Saturday, we may stand it and just do it up, even though one of those nights might be 60, but we'll just stand it up for that week.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering a lot of my questions. And I think in general, what we're seeing is we don't have enough beds. We don't have enough permanent supportive housing. We need more services. And I think that y'all are doing what you can, and that becomes a question for decision makers. So I hope, and we've said this to, I think when the affordable housing bond passed, we were very clear with Reginald, like, come ask for, we knew it was going to be extra capacity needed in the department. Really, please don't be shy. And so we can't do what we have been doing with the same amount of money when the population and the needs have changed significantly. And I think we all knew that. I will say that the numbers of folks, it is alarming, quite frankly. I think if you're downtown, The amount of interaction with some of our unsheltered neighbors has increased. I think that there's more foot traffic downtown, so there's a little bit less, I think it's better. And I think as council members, we're certainly starting to get more comments from residents. And what I don't want Durham to do, and I think we can all have opinions about, I forgot the Supreme Court case, Grant Pass, and what the landscape is. And so I think our challenge is we're not going to do what other communities are doing. I think that on council, I hope I can count on my colleagues' support. I don't think that that's where we're moving, even if residents are asking that. And that's where the tenor of that conversation is starting to change. And we have to be the hard line of we're not going to dehumanize folks who don't have anywhere to go. Especially when we know that a lot of times it's families. That's what we're seeing. It is very different than the landscape in 2018, 2019. And then the last thing is with folks who are showing up, Chicago, New York, some other of our large cities, the amount of folks who have literally been put on buses and dropped, and the amount of money that those cities have had to spend, and the community fights that have happened for folks saying, well, why are we spending resources that we need for these other things on these folks who just showed up here? We are very fortunate in Durham that we haven't had a huge presence of that, but clearly we are getting some. How many of those folks are showing up or being dropped in our community are unaccompanied minors?
To my knowledge, none are unaccompanied minors. They've been families and generally larger families. So it's not like mom, dad, and 2 children. It's multi-generation, 5 to 10 people in a household.
If we end up with any unaccompanied minors, and this is critically important within our immigration system, there is a very small window where those kids get protected status. And so it is important that y'all's department connects with Justice Matters on those kinds of visas, because what we know is a lot of times those kids do show up in our public schools, and then we miss the opportunity because they turn 18 and they don't get that access to legal status anymore. The window's closed. And so I guess if you all do encounter unaccompanied minors specifically, it's critically important that we connect them to legal immigration services that we are funding, specifically because it gives them a different outcome. Otherwise, we lose the opportunity. Thank you. Those are all my questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Colleagues, Councilmember Riss, did you?
I just have one question and a comment. So the question is, it was a little hard to follow the data, the different source of funds, federal, state, local. I'm sure you got a spreadsheet somewhere that just shows the total budget for the homeless system and like columns for like federal, state, local. Do you have that? I don't want to make you do any special work, but I mean, that's a total there, but do you have that like sort of in it? It shows like total federal sources, total state, local. It's sort of in a, and
this is, I can break it out. I mean, so your HUD COC grant is federal. And state ESG. So you'd ask, let me make sure I'm understanding what you're asking, because everything up there is federal except for DHF. It's just federal money that flows different ways.
But you got the state grant and state ESG.
State ESG. So ESG is Emergency Solutions Grant, which is a HUD program. It's federal money.
Comes to the state.
HUD sends money to the state for emergency solutions, and HUD sends money to the city for emergency solutions grant because we're an entitlement jurisdiction. So we get federal dollars for ESG from two sources. And we as the city manage our city entitlement money and put that into contract, monitor those contracts, and the city manager executes those contracts. And then we make sure that the money's spent. We draw the money from HUD. The state ESG money, we submit an application to the state. The state gets their allocation from HUD. Then the state enters into contract directly with the nonprofit providers. We're out of that loop. And they administer that state ESG.
This is what I'm asking, because there's also county funds that aren't on here. Like, it'd be great to see just like itemized county, city, federal, state funds. That would be helpful just to sort of see that, just to understand it better.
Yeah, we're working towards that.
Appreciate that. The other, just a comment is, we spend probably more time in this council on housing, especially on rezoning cases, than almost anything else. We fight a lot about that. it seems to be pretty clear from your presentation. I mean, you talked about what's the numbers like at any one time around 35 families unsheltered. Because we talked about the waiting list, right? 55 individuals who are on that waiting list. I'm pretty sure the last time I talked to folks at the Housing Authority, I think the waiting list for the Housing Authority is like 400 people. So if anyone didn't already know, like we've got a housing crisis. We've had that crisis that's been going on, right? You also mentioned in your presentation, harder to get low-income families into permanent supportive housing. And so I just want to say publicly, this is still a major challenge for our community. We need to find ways responsibly to build more housing, whether it's subsidized permanent housing, permanent affordable housing, whether it's market rate housing. We just need more housing because we've got a housing crisis. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman, please.
Thank you. I did want to just follow up and say that the housing needs to actually accept the vouchers and Section 8. So it's always incredibly like depressing to go through this, but I do want to state very clearly that I am the alternate, and I am also the alternate on a different group for the same night. And so I'm really stretched and trying to figure out how to be more participatory in the process. And so if there are other meetings other than that fourth Wednesday, please let me know.
Sure.
I also will say that with the town hall last August 22nd, we had a chance to go through a lot of this, and there were two things I wanted to make sure that I followed up on and that you didn't include in your presentation, which I think is important. The phone number for entry point, which is a new number, 984-287-8313, if I'm correct.
Sounds right. Let me check. Hold on. I don't have it memorized.
But I'm working on memorizing. I get a lot of phone calls and emails. And then just to really ping a process in figuring out how to bring forward in a similar way, how we're talking about culling the deer. There was a conversation with Joint City County on trying to figure out how to swap some land so we could actually build some housing with St. Philip's Episcopal Church and the Urban Ministries. And I'd love to figure out how we bring that back forward for a conversation, which I think is incredibly important, because that could be hundreds of units that could be available, or hundreds of beds that could be available, but we're not having that conversation. And those would specifically be for unsheltered folks. And then thirdly, there was a question from Councilmember Cook, and she wanted to just be clear that this number doesn't include those who are in hotels.
Which number?
These numbers that you're giving for people who are unhoused, unsheltered, unhoused is not including people who are
Correct.
staying in hotels.
Correct.
And then to that point, she also said something else. Hold on. If we're doing the point in time, as a model, Durham is doing the point in time count more than once a year.
We do it once a year.
We do it once a year, and we're doing it in January, which is
Correct.
the coldest time and lowest numbers. Is there also an additional time that we'll do a point in time count when it's a little warmer
So
and bearable, like in the fall?
good question. Let me start with the reason we do the January point in time count is because that's the nationwide count that sort of HUD says this is when continuums across the country need to do the count, because they take all this aggregated data during the coldest month to figure out who's truly unsheltered, because people tend to be more willing to go indoors if there is an indoor place to go when it's really cold. When it's nice out, shelter capacity drops and people tend to be more willing to camp outside for a variety of reasons. And having spent 20 years running shelters before I came to work for the city, it's very interesting to see all of a sudden it's 10 degrees outside and your shelter's busting at the seams. And it's 75, it's nice, low humidity. And all of a sudden it's like, what happened to all these people breaking down my door trying to get in when it was cold outside? They're perfectly comfortable being outside and don't want the bed. So we could do it. It's labor intensive to do a point in time count. So doing it twice a year does take a lot of work. And then the deduplication, the data analysis, we do that count we don't get the count finalized for a couple months because it's so much data that has to go through between all these different places and making sure different people aren't counted twice because of a spelling of a name or an identifier that might have been typed wrong. So it is something that we do. That's where we look at our longitudinal system analysis to see who's coming through and try and use that as a proxy. It's not perfect, but it's something we've talked about trying to do, and how do we do it and not have it
I think
overwhelm the
also
staff.
with the outreach team with Housing for New Hope, I do think that if there is a more coordinated effort around those outreach days, maybe that could also be a way to just kind of keep track.
Sure.
And I just had a couple of follow-up questions from the January. I didn't notice any numbers coming back in around youth and people with disabilities or
Sure.
differently abled, physical versus developmental.
I will need to go pull those numbers for you. I can get back. So youth and disabling conditions. Okay.
And I think other than that, I will continue to ask a lot more questions.
Please.
However I can get them.
I will share that when it comes to disabling conditions, it is by self-report in our system. And we just pulled some number for another presentation that we're doing this afternoon for another group on substance abuse and mental health. And it was interesting, the people who were calling coordinated entry, 9% of 3,491 people, 9% identified having a mental health issue. And when you looked at mental health self-report and people who are in the street outreach program, 28% self-identified as having a mental health challenge. So nearly a third of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness identified they had mental health challenges. I don't recall the alcohol, drug, and dual diagnosis numbers off the top of my head, but we were looking at this and we're like, wow, this is by self-report probably way underrepresented. So I just want to put that caveat. When you see the number, we don't have clinicians out verifying it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's very alarming. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam Manager, did you want to? And then we'll get to you, Councilmember Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. One of the things, certainly this presentation did not include too much development that is in the pipeline related to permanently supportive housing in particular. So before the staff left, I did want you to bring that up in the public, because there is a request for proposals out for a funding source for the development, and didn't know if you had information with you today as to whether or not some of the other dedicated housing funding that had been allocated, particularly in the first RFP that we put out, is for permanently supportive housing in any way.
I could talk about two pieces. I could talk about there's about $4.1 million of home ARP money that is not, it's in the RFP is being drafted and will be coming out soon. We did have a developer meeting last week, and developers came out to kind of hear about all the different pots of money that are coming out so that they can start thinking through. And since the RFP has not come out yet, we don't know who will respond, but there was some significant interest in developing from the home ARP, which is $4.1 million with the goal of developing a minimum of 25 units. And those 25 units are prioritized for households exiting homelessness. And those 25 units must be new. So it can't be like a rehab of an existing building where people are currently living. We need more units online. So if you find an abandoned building that has 25 units, you could buy it, rehab it, and make it usable, because they're not usable right now. Those units will come with project-based vouchers to help cover that gap. We do not have supportive services money lined up as of yet to be able to provide those supportive services. So if somebody needed supportive services, we might have to look at some mixing and matching of different program types to utilize those. Otherwise, we might use those 25 units for people exiting homelessness who have a history of stability and just need a subsidy and don't need the supportive services. Like they're just low income households. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to work through and figure out what's available to make sure that the project is viable and households aren't moved in and set up to fail. We don't want that to happen because nobody's happy in that situation. We also, HUD has an RFP out now for a COC builds, which developers can go after to build permanent supportive housing as well. And I don't remember the dollar amount. I believe it's maybe about $2 million. It's a small amount based on our, don't quote me on that. So I'll go back and find the exact number for the COC builds because it's based on our NOFO allocation. And it's, if you're between this number and this number, here's how much you can go. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Baker.
I'm just going to ask one pretty high level question. If you just had an injection of new resources, I'd be curious to know, and you've got your eyes on this complex space, all the moving pieces, what would you see as the top 2 or 3 priorities for how to expend new resources going your way?
If you had a pot of money, the biggest piece is housing subsidies and the supportive services. So, housing choice vouchers, there's not enough of them. So creating a local fund of money that could be turned into a voucher and then pairing it with local money to provide supportive services would open up units. That would be a help for some group of folks. And there are some group in our homeless system that are currently happy to accept housing and they'll go into rapid rehousing. And as soon as they have to put $5 towards the rent, here are my keys, I'm out. And that's part of homelessness, part of where people are of wanting housing, but not feeling they have to pay for it. So there's going to be a number of people who are going to be either unsheltered or unstably housed for a variety of reasons. And the other piece is we spend a lot of time talking to people and figuring out what they want for their housing, because what we want and what they want may not be the same. But I would say right now, if I had to say something that could make an immediate difference, money for subsidizing rent and the supportive services to go with it, and the flexibility to use that supportive services in a variety of ways, because there are folks who don't qualify for Medicaid and may need in-home nursing care. And hey, here's some money that we can get this person housed. They don't qualify for assisted living. They don't qualify for a family care home, but here's a way that we could sort of make this work in a way that would work for that household.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman, you had a follow-up?
I just wanted to make sure that I didn't leave out, I know usually the conversation comes up around veterans, and I did want to make sure that that number was still at 0.
I don't remember the number of veterans currently that are unsheltered, but we do have a system in place that does work very well. We have a meeting twice a month with the VA and the other veterans providers that we work through all of a by name list of veterans who are experiencing homelessness and try and get them paired up with our supportive services for veteran families. It's run through Volunteers of America or our other TROSA or some of our other veteran service providers.
Thank you for that, Councilman. Colleagues, anyone else? Colin, thank you so much. I have some questions that I'll get to you offline after, in the coming days. I just want to briefly say before we move on, I was the ASAC liaison for a number of years on council. And I remember, and Mayor Schul and I would have this conversation with others at that time. You've made it clear there's a lot of competing variables. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that one of the questions philosophically we have to answer, and this kind of carries over into other areas of public policy, is for every dollar we spend on a temporary bed or a shelter, that's a dollar we can't spend on permanent housing. Mm-hmm. And the tension is between, because I remember the focus we turned to, or in my days with ATAC, was rapid rehousing. Mm-hmm. As quickly as possible, getting you a set of keys, because with the shelter system comes a culture and all kinds of other things that build upon itself and compound. So the lack of beds had to be held in tension with us focusing more on you not staying in the shelter system or getting as many people as quickly as possible out of the shelter into rapid rehousing. It's a terrible analogy, but it's almost a struggle we have with, there are folk who look at birth rates in certain neighborhoods and say, we're going to need more jail cells. So do we build more jail cells or do we put more in education in classrooms so not to fill, those jail cells? Do we focus on outcomes that codify the negative, or do we put money and things to kind of counteract those? And it's an imperfect analogy, but it's a similar discussion. Do we build up our resources to codify a shelter system, temporary beds, or do we focus more? And we got to do them both, obviously. Or do we focus more on getting folk as quickly as possible into a key situation? So that's where some of and resources, of course, are limited. Do you want to build it's less expensive to send somebody to Harvard than it is to, put them in an incarceration. And it's less expensive for folk to be in a home than it is for a shelter system in perpetuity. Although we've got, to Council Caballero's point, we've got to be able to, in the interim, the short term, do what we need to do for folk. But part of that tension with the resources is, do we want to focus on that part, or do we want to focus on getting folk into permanent housing? I heard you talk about the money in the pipeline, and I thank Madam Manager for highlighting that. So the struggle continues, but I just want to thank you for the incredible work, oftentimes unheralded and uncelebrated work that goes on. But it is absolutely critical work. These are our most vulnerable residents and neighbors and friends, and we have folk in the city that are working hard every day, well beyond the close of business, to help them and deal with them. And the city's grateful to you for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I get my questions here. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Colleagues, thank you for some excellent questions and engagement on this. Are our friends from Durham Public Schools here? All right. Synchronizing enrollment, capacity, and residential development in Durham. Presentation by Durham Public Schools. Welcome. You have 3 minutes. I'm kidding. That's colleagues, do you need a couple minutes of break while they're all right. We're gonna reconvene at 3. Is that okay? All right, 3 o'clock. Take a bio break, 3. All right. We're in recess till 3.
There. Let's make sure we're around.
There you go.
Good.
Okay. Oh, wow. Thank you. What appreciation.
All right, friends, it's 3 p.m. We are back in session. If we'll come to order. And if any of my colleagues are in the building listening to this on speakers, you are summoned back. And we are going to welcome our friends from Durham Public Schools. Let's have order in the chamber, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. You have the comm.
Well, on that note, I'll proceed if that's for good. Okay. All right.
By all means, please.
Well, thank you for the invitation to attend today's City Council meeting. My name is Matthew Palmer. I am the Senior Executive Director of School Planning, Transportation, and Nutrition, as well as Real Estate and Development for Durham Public Schools. So I have 4 departments under my canopy. It is an exciting time in Durham, particularly here in Durham Public Schools. We have new leadership and a plan moving forward. Today, I wanted to provide an overview of what it is that we do in Durham Public Schools and the intimate relationship and, to a degree, codependency we have between this opportunity in Durham of one school system, one Durham County, and one city of Durham. Unique to North Carolina, most communities, school systems, and counties are not set up as such. Even in Wake County, it is 13 municipalities, Wake County and Wake County schools all working together. So with that, I wanted to give an overview of how some of our work touches the various institutions, our intent and effort to bring together the Durham community to focus on the importance of not only residential growth, but also the connection with education and student enrollment. With me today is Sarah Young, the planning director here in Durham, and it is a reflection of our now 5-year standing collaboration between our teams and departments, between DPS and the City and County Planning Department, as well as Ms. Kristen Brookshire, our lead school planner at Durham Public Schools. Some topics to cover. Again, this is a review for some that were at the joint session with the county. I was requested, that was our 4th presentation on this topic. We have been picking up, I think, interest as we go. We initially presented this in spring of 2024 to our Board of Education, who asked that we bring it to the joint board and county commission meeting. And we're here today with you all at a city council level. So we'll talk about the interconnectedness between DPS student enrollment and our schools, past, present, and future of enrollment, where we're looking over the next 10 years. With respect to residential growth, how we manage that in North Carolina for public schools. It's pretty complicated and we have limited options, but I will review what we have. And then where we are and where we hope to go between Durham Public Schools, the county, and the city for collaboration. Mr. Middleton, I did want to lift up and really pivot on the prior topic and saying, when neighborhoods are being built, we have an opportunity to plan for those students with schools, pre-K, wraparound services, food, and transportation, providing opportunity for every child. That is the very spirit of our work here, is to be prepared for the future Durham residents as well as those that we have today. This past year, Durham Public Schools Board of Education announced the new strategic plan that takes us through 2028. Those priority goals for enrollment. We are intended to grow and looking to grow by about 5,000 students over the next 5 years. I want to review our enrollment forecast, what that looks like between our current enrollment and new residential growth. Element 1 of our long-range plan is that bedrock of students. We start with students. That leads into our facilities, both those that are built and those that will need to be built. What's the standard for learning and how do we get there? That will be our needs assessment that we work on with Durham County. Ultimately, that is the facility capital plan, our priorities for school facilities, both new seats and modernizing seats. You see that as element 3. Together, giving you a run of show, kind of a timeline archive of where we are and where we're headed over this next few months. By spring of this next year, we anticipate that we will have a full, clear look at what we're going to need for our school facilities in conjunction with the county. Durham Public Schools is tasked with ensuring utilization, or that the students that are enrolled in the school system fit within our school facilities and our capacity of those schools. Developments that are approved by City Council and the Planning Commission do influence student enrollment. An age-restricted neighborhood is very different than a traditional market rate neighborhood, which could itself be different than one that is receiving subsidies or vouchers. We factor all that in when we're looking at developments that are under review and approval by the city. The county is tasked with the responsibility of providing K-12 seats for our Durham County school resident citizens. The point there is that this dynamic, this triangulation of DPS having to be responsible for utilization, the city reviewing and approving developments, and the county needing to provide the adequate public facilities so that our children are learning in adequate schools, not mobile classrooms, and preferably not private or charter schools, but in Durham public schools, is very much what this relationship is about. Student enrollment in DPS is, for the first time in a while, growing this year. We're excited about that. That is one of the bedrocks of our Growing Together comprehensive student assignment plan. On an annual cadence, every year, we try to predict exactly down to the seat, to the classroom, to the school, how many students are coming next year. That's used for teacher allotments. That's used for decisions on staffing, near-term decisions, if you will. Long-term decisions include which schools do we need to renovate? Which schools do we need perhaps another additional facility at an elementary, middle, or high school level? That rolls into our long-range facility plan and our capital improvement plan, which is reflected in bond referendums and support from our community. I wanted to lace that out because I think we have to be able to do both. Talk about the micro-specific annual work we do at a classroom and school level, as well as the long-term forecasting of what's ahead for us. We are projected right now, if we follow our residential birth rates as well as our growth, that in the next 10 years, we will grow by approximately 5,000 students, right? That is a conservative estimate at this point based on existing, what we would call student generation rates, or matching similar home types with geographies to understand if we're putting in 100 homes on Olive Branch Road, what is a reasonable comparison of existing homes and what choices are those families making? And as development on boroughs here in Durham, what is the additive impact? So right now, and this is a today number, as we move forward and we'll continue to update this 10-year forecast every year, that is our job. Ms. Brookshire, who's with me, leads that group where we are annually updating not only what's going to happen next year, but what's going to happen in 10 years. We get to that number by looking at elementary, middle, and high school. We've also got 5 regions now in Durham Public Schools. So the northern region is roughly the area north of Interstate 85. The eastern region is east of the East End Connector, or Interstate 885. The southeast region is south of 147 and east of Fayetteville Street, but is inclusive of Colvard Farms and the South Point Mall area. And the southwest region is west of Fayetteville Street, going to the town of Chapel Hill line. And I should share, here in Durham, there is a good segment of the town of Chapel Hill that is also experiencing residential growth that's in Durham County. The central region, the core of our community, is bracketed by 147, Interstate 85, and that East End Connector. When we look at our existing enrolled students at an elementary level, you see we have 14,189. The growth that we forecast from the additional residential development that has already been approved is an additional 2,228 students, which is about a 16% increase in enrollment. That's a good thing. We definitely want to continue to elevate our enrollment numbers. It also means that as you compare our capacities with that total enrollment, that we will be beyond capacity or will be at 103% utilization. You can see how that breaks down geographically, where we will still have some capacity, for example, in the Southeast region, but will be significantly over capacity in the Central region. As you're all well aware, development is spatially concentrated in certain pockets of Durham and stable in others. This is reflecting that. At a middle school level, you can see our total students currently at 6,600 with an additional 891 on the way, or again, about a 13% growth. Let me repeat, that is a great thing. We are here to promote residential growth, as you all are as well. I will share just on a personal level. Many of my 600 staff who are bus drivers and cafeteria workers are seeking the very housing that you're reviewing. So I wanted to be clear throughout this presentation that we're aware of the pressures on Durham City and the county as we grow. What that does mean is that we'll be completely full at middle school in 10 years. At a high school level, it's even a bit more dire. We are currently at over 10,000 students. At a high school enrollment level this year alone, Jordan High School has 2,300 students. And there are only 1,800 seats in the school. So that's 500 additional students at Jordan High School than it can support. There are 12 mobile classrooms on the front side of Jordan High School that was built in 1958. All of this is to load into a larger picture, not a specific lens, not a specific school or region. But you can see, especially as we work to the right, the utilization for our high schools in nearly every region will be significantly over our capacities. So we're left asking the question, what can we do with that? And what should we do with that? And what are we asking for county and city partners as we grow here in Durham? Well, we're in North Carolina, so we definitely have limited options. The School of Government did a wonderful white paper led by Adam Lovelady that kind of synthetically pulled together what impacts does development have on schools and how do schools impact development? That's both ways. Our team is both responding to the growth that we see at our doorstep and also wearing the developer hat when it's time to build a new school. We have to look at both sides of that lens. However, because we're in North Carolina, we do not have bonding authority as a school system, nor have we the ability to levy an education impact fees. Most recently, Chapel Hill Carborough Schools was doing that and was ordered by the state, you either return the money or stop doing it at a county and school system level. The adequate public facility ordinances, again, that Orange County has, we do not have any such sort of development management tool here in Durham, nor are we advocating for one. What we are aware of is that as growth is being reviewed, it is a major constraint and a consideration as we go forward. We also do not have a precedent of capping schools. Wake County does, of course, they're well known for that. That can lead to driving by 2 or 3 schools to get to the next open seat. These are just some considerations and limitations on how we could manage growth. What we are doing is using the tools that are in our toolbox. We have the ability to change and adjust boundaries. We did that with that Southwest region in Creekside Elementary that opened with 12 mobile classrooms on campus 20 years ago. Those mobiles are still there today. We also adjusted for Githens and Brogden. Again, those are both Creekside and Githens in the Southwest region, major areas of growth over this past few decades. But what we learned in isolating and focusing on those specific schools was that we had to have a community reset. Focusing on 1 or 2 schools is not going to help us when we have a large dilemma at hand. Over the past 4 years, we've completed the arc of our comprehensive student assignment plan called Growing Together, which is very intentional about balancing the objectives of schools that are close to home, but also have intentionality with diversity and equity at the forefront, while preparing ourselves for the growth that is at the door for Durham. We've opened 3 schools in the last 3 years. Lyons Farm Elementary School in 2022 on Scott King Road, and are still working to put the finishing touches on that school, which includes a crosswalk, providing direct access for the neighborhoods to the north, there are 7, to the school, which is on the south side of Scott King Road. We've also opened Northern High School last year, and this year, truly a beacon of hope for us here in Durham is Murray Massenburg Elementary School. named after Pauli Murray and Dorothy Massenberg. They're at South Roxborough and MLK. 800 students and opening strongly under Principal Middleton Brown's leadership. We also have 6 schools that are scheduled for renovation. Currently, Glen is one of those schools. You're aware that east to northeast region of Durham is growing as well as we talk about Glen Station and the area immediately around I-85 and Glen Road. To bring all that home, our team in DPS that is in school planning is looking specifically at utilization. What are the students and what are the seats? In North Carolina, there is a legislative law that indicates exactly what those ratios can be, particularly at an elementary school level. Bear in mind, we also have community Durham values around access to pre-kindergarten and universal pre-K. That is eating into the number of permanent seats and capacities we have as schools. We have those values, but to bring those values into our buildings is a very complex task that we've been working with the county on these past few years. To repeat, we are not able to levy an education impact fee for developers. It costs $100,000 to build 1 seat from a capital perspective. Locally, it costs another $5,500 annually to operate at a local budgetary plus the state contribution. So when we think about the implications, the marginal effect of 1 seat in a school, it is profound and it is long. Our team's been working hard through and after COVID in preparation for days like this, opportunities to come together, and I want to emphasize that again today. This presentation, our only ask is that we are all aware of the impacts of choice. We have inventoried and walked every one of our classrooms. Square footage, does it have a bathroom, does it have a sink? Is it equipped with a hot water or a changing table? Could it be used to support children with autism, developmental needs, or pre-kindergarten? We have developed neighborhood planning units, and I know that Director Egan's here as well. The neighborhood planning units start with road speed because 35 miles an hour is the speed that a 9-year-old can't tell the speed or distance of an oncoming car. We had a student hit at Duke Manor on LaSalle on Friday morning, and I was the first responder. Child pedestrian safety and how we route and assign students matters a great deal. So we started with neighborhood planning units. The 750 that you see there is reflective of the road speeds and community infrastructure. Internal to DPS, we now have 5 regions. Those are not only designed to ensure equity and access, but also prepare us for growth. If a development comes online in East Durham, we can quickly pivot on the enrolled students in that area, as well as the capacity of the schools in that area and any other developments that have been located there. Our boundaries are now designed to reflect the residential growth. You'll see Glen and Bethesda are on our capital improvement plan specifically because they're situated to support the Eastern region growth. But those renovations, though they cost $150 million adjoined, only generate about 300 additional seats. Those campuses were in deep need of modernization as it was. We're pushing on 40 years. Externally, we've been at the table for the update to the Durham Comprehensive Plan. I joke, but I'm not joking, that I was there wearing the Engage Durham pink shirts here in the community, listening to people and caring just as much as they do about the future of Durham. Director Young has been phenomenal with her team to be at the table with us. We're making traction and progress, but we need help. Some next steps on our side, on the Durham Public Schools side. Number 1, we have to keep doing the work. As developments, whether it's a rezoning or new construction by zoning right, are coming through the pipeline, we will continue to update what it means for the long-term enrollment in Durham Public Schools, that 10-year student enrollment forecast. At the same time, we've got a lot of work to do in our schools. If you read the papers or you listen to the parents or our students or our staff or any of us, we will say very clearly, we were in a severe state of facility disrepair. From HVAC systems to water fountains, we have a lot of work to do on a base level of standard for our facilities. When we talk about pre-kindergarten, EC, or K-12 classrooms, or an art room, or a music room, what should be in place for every student, not just privileged students, not those that can buy into a particular school, but for every school. That will be our standard that then is companioned with the facility conditions assessment, which will lead into our long-range facility master plan and our work with the county. The last point on this slide, and I want to restate it. There will be an ongoing tension and need to have a rolling prioritization based on availability of funding and criticalness of need between our deferred maintenance and building additional seats for more capacity. We have many old schools and we have many students on the way. Some thoughts and considerations for you all as City Council. We will continue to work with the Planning Department with procedures for development review, sharing with you where we are with enrollment, both this year and in 10 years, and importantly, the additive impact of prior decisions for approval. We do need your help to continue to build community awareness and support for those enrollment increases and our needs at a DPS level. I guess, again, not only additional seats, but ensuring all schools are to standards. We have the opportunity to build a task force for growth in education. I was part of the comp plan task force for workforce development and education. That's a great start. But again, continuing to have a shared commitment of, and I'll use this word, the marginal impact of choice. We are fully aware that we do not want to stand in between the needs of our own staff as well as our community when it comes to housing. We have no intent to do so. We do need to make sure that we're all aware of the cumulative impact of choices that have been made and choices that lie ahead for us. That task force has the opportunity to continue to pull together that information, make it accessible, transparent, and with integrity. We do not want any ambiguity. We don't want there to be any confusion about where we are and what difficult choices we have to make at a school system level, a county level, and the city level. And with that, my team and I are here to answer any questions, but we were asked to bring this to you all, and it is with pleasure.
Thank you so much for a very excellent presentation. Again, welcome. We're glad you're with us. Colleagues, that's the presentation. I'll yield to any of you for questions or comments. Councilmember Baker, please.
Thank you for your presentation. Got a few questions here. One is school site dedication. Do you need developers to be dedicating school sites to the Durham Public School system? Is that something that would be helpful to the Durham Public School system? I used to be a low-level planner out in Texas, and that was kind of the norm, is that developers would dedicate 15, 20 acres of a large development directly to the school system. They saw it as a benefit to their development, and we would simply receive that and hand it off to the school system out there. What's your reaction to something like that?
One of the opportunities we had as we go back to those new schools that were constructed recently, that was the remaining parcels of our land bank. It was wonderful to walk in the door in 2019 and have at least 3, possibly 4 constructible parcels. Lyons Farm was shovel ready. We had an approved site plan. Let me walk a little further with you. Even a conversation about how do we ensure that those commitments from developers are actionable and timely. I think we can look at recent large developments in Southern Durham and recognize that there may have been some challenges with the follow through. So the mechanism for that is reviewable and I think could be improved upon. We certainly can receive donations and proffers from developers. I would say if you look at some of the best examples of planned neighborhood and residential growth with schools, we can go to Southern Village and Mary Scroggs Elementary School in Chapel Hill. We can go to Briar Chapel, which is in Chatham County. Bill Bishop, a colleague of mine at Chapel Hill, was the developer there and ensured that a school was planted in the heart of the neighborhood. It is hard for us. We have about a 5-year lag to catch up to residential growth. So we're either leading it or we're following it. And right now we are following it severely.
So to get there, we probably need input from the school system, right? Like rezoning case is coming, annexation case is coming, and the school system says this would be a good area for schools. Is this something that the developer would be interested in working with us on? Is that?
We were able to share one of the benefits of the regions is that we take the county and we're shrinking it down to a focal lens. And again, it isn't, I want to be cautious about what I can request versus what I could advise. So on the question of, are there areas of the county that we can say we're going to need help in this area? We can certainly get that conversation underfoot. I think that's part of the inventorying, documentation, and sharing of the cumulative choices made and those that are ahead of us.
That'd be great. We also receive a voluntary donation frequently during the rezoning and annexation process for schools. I would be curious to know, if we did have the power to levy an impact fee, which we obviously don't, what would that number be? And how do we arrive at that number? What kind of nexus study is necessary? What would we want to be receiving from developers ideally as a donation? Were they to be able to provide that? What would the number be and why? I think that would be an interesting thing to know. And what's the difference between what we're oftentimes being gifted today and that amount? I think that would be interesting to know. You talked briefly about the neighborhood development units. Can you just elaborate a little bit more? I didn't quite follow.
I think it's related to the prior comment and question as well. And for the illustrative purposes, let's discuss just 100 single family homes in the East region, which is fairly reasonable. Right? What we are able to do is identifying by geography as well as by housing type. So there is a difference between townhomes versus apartments and condos versus single family detached homes. We are able to say at a unit level, what is the likelihood, given all of we've got 15 years of data, we've mapped all of our housing typology. We're close collaborators with the research group I've led at NC State University at ITRI. This is the work we've done nationally prior to my coming to Durham. The prior administration recruited me to bring this into Durham Public Schools. This is what I do at a national level. I'm a standing member of the National APA for public schools. We've taken those best practices that identify housing typology and geography and say, if we're building 100 homes approximately by grade level, elementary, middle, and high school, and I will go past approximately and say precisely, what does the data tell us of the likelihood that we're going to have out of even one household, an elementary student, a middle school student, and a high school student? 100 homes is easier because then we can take those percentages and turn them into students. So in some geographies, that may be 15 students per 100 homes. In other areas, that might be 25. That's the purpose of having the regions, is to say, geographically, what we're building and where we're building is going to influence the overall number of students that are coming for us, to us, I should say. So I want to answer that question and say, sort of in a larger sense, we're able to produce an estimation of the number of students that will be generated by development. We call that a student generation rate. We then share that information, which says for 100 homes proposed, we're talking 25 or 30 students, depending on the area and the type of house that's being built. I mentioned age targeted or age focused or age restricted developments. That's a great example of, we would put that at 0. Right? There's occasionally a grand child that might live in that development, but largely speaking, that's uncommon. So we break it down to that level by region and by housing typology. What are we looking at? And then we're able to share, I'll just repeat what I shared earlier. It is $100,000 for constructing 1 seat today in today's market. It is an additional annually $5,500 per student to operate and educate at a school system level. I would not feel comfortable putting out a precise number for you as far as what that would be. I think other people would need to weigh in on that.
Last thing, when we look at school sites that were built, let's just say pre-World War II, neighborhoods built around school sites pre-World War II, and the way that we've planned, developed, zoned our cities since then, I think there's a pretty strong contrast, right? Like Durham Public Schools, the old hillside, these centrally located, civically celebrated buildings and spaces on typically smaller parcels, multiple levels, maybe located closer to the street, and parking was with parking, but parking wasn't the dominant feature of those sites. And then strong connectivity around the school sites on older schools. Newer schools set further back from the street, parking sort of dominates the front, and then usually they're on arterials, bigger roads to cross if anybody wants to cross them. If anyone's walking to school or biking to school, you have higher speeds. Normally not surrounded by a highly connected neighborhood. And so what we have and what we've created over time, over decades, is schools that are not walkable, that are not safe to get to by walking. Of course, some people will walk, some people will bike, but overall, we have trended toward building cities, neighborhoods, and schools that are not easily walkable. Is that something that we can work together on, particularly around the comprehensive plan, the unified development ordinance rewrite, in thinking about school sites, the way school sites are situated, school buildings on school sites, and their surrounding neighborhoods? Do you think that's something that we can come to the table and think about how we can maybe not go back to the way that we used to entirely, but think more comprehensively about how they could be more easily and safely accessible via multiple modes of transportation?
That is the genesis of my dissertation. I used to sit in Mr. Riss' seat when I was a member of BPAC 14 years ago. Yes, indeed. That is very much what we can do. Let me briefly go to that and share with you. Clarence Perry, look into the Neighborhood Planning Unit, 1929, Regional Plan Association. Everything you're referencing really started with the idea of a 15-minute neighborhood, and schools were at the heart of everything. We have lost sight of that, I would agree. I would also just remind all of us that when we talk about access, we have to talk about access for whom. Some of those arterials you're referencing also ensure that children from all over Durham can access those schools, and that's important. We've come a long way. And lastly, the easiest artifact I could hold back would be that at Murray-Massenburg, we have flipped passenger vehicle and bus ridership. You look at like W.G. Pearson Elementary School, the bus riders are brought along the back of the school. That school was built about 20 years ago. With Murray-Massenburg, the bus riders have priority. They are visible, and they are the first students that you see when you come onto the campus with intent. Ms. Brookshire had the good fortune. We both have our careers background in safe routes to school, but we are also aware that this is a much larger conversation about for whom is it accessible. So I would take that conversation and just kind of put more air in the tire and say we can do a lot more, and we hope to do more with you all. And I'm glad that Director Egan is here today as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Freeman, Councilmember Freeman, then we'll come to you, Councilmember Riss.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation and happy that we're having the conversation. I definitely would like to figure out how to cross-pollinate, because I do feel like growth and development highly impacts the schools, and where we're seeing a lot more annexations without the planned development around the schools. I just want to, I just keep hearkening back to, I'm a New Jersey girl, and in New Jersey, you actually have to build the school, not just offer a lot. And so it's hard each time we go through these cases to see the lack of community benefit and not even being offered that much. And so I really appreciate the hard number of at least having the 100,000 per student. Each time we're talking about what, $500 offered for a student added to our mix. And I just want to add to that the concern that I have been hearing around this overcapacity and the way in which at one school lunch had to be canceled because it's creating some hardships for students in ways that look like a lot of inappropriate behavior. But I'm trying to unpack it, and I just see the utilization numbers aren't including the schools of Ignite or the system of Ignite, whatever Holton has, and Lakeview and Hospital, and trying to understand if these are locations that need to be turned on or turned all the way off, or if you have any insights on what's the plan around those locations or those numbers as well.
Sure. And with our specialty campuses that do afford alternative education options, whether that's online instruction or a heavy emphasis on career technical there at Holton, right? We are here in operations to support the vision of our academic leaders and our community leaders. And so I couldn't say more than each of those campuses, Lakeview, Holton, those are very small campuses, oftentimes some of our older facilities. One thing that is exciting, and I want to take your comment question and bring it to, we are doing a district-wide 6 million square foot walk of our facility conditions. That is inclusive of Holton and Lakeview. We have to put all the chips on the board and look at everything. It is our responsibility to be fiscally and operationally responsible. And we are right in the midst of that. So that will, if I go back to that timeline with the colored squares, in the next 6 months, we'll have a lot more clarity around that.
Appreciate that. And if you could share when those walks are, that might be helpful. I know at a previous PAC meeting, it was concerning. It was kind of heartbreaking. One of the residents broke down in tears around the facility lack of maintenance at Holton specifically, and how there's kind of this drag on whether or not you can get stuff done. And so even the ADA door not working for almost over a year is a problem where, you know, someone in a wheelchair will not be able to enter. I definitely am, there's so much to unpack in it. And I definitely am trying to say that I would love to be a better partner in that. I don't know how that looks, but I do know that we've got conversations with the city around transportation that could speak to, you know, pedestrian safety. And we have conversations around workforce development that could speak to some of that career readiness and the specialty schools and funding that could be made available. And I could probably think of more, but those are the two off the top of my head. But I do want to say that it's a huge priority that's been missed. And I know in the 7.5 years I've been on council, I've tried to raise concerns around, you know, how our development sprawls and makes it so that these islands created, they're not child friendly. And so your play is limited, and all of those things have a weight in how I make my decision. So I appreciate this presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Risk.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Mr. Palmer, again for the presentation. It's good to see you again. I'm glad we shared the same seat here when you were on BPAC. So my first question is, if you can go back to the slide on the different slides on utilization. There was elementary school, middle, and high school. Just want to make sure I understand the data there. So what this shows, for example, elementary school, it shows that currently right now, we're at 89% utilization for across the whole district wide, right? Although it varies based on region, right? And so what this then shows is that by 2033, 34, that with forecasted increase in students, Does this also include forecast increase in capacity that you're planned or not? Just to understand, like, just looking again at that number for like the 103% in 2033-34, that means that with expected increase in students and expected increase in facilities, I'm guessing.
Well,
right?
it shows what is funded. So
Right,
I'll
right.
leave it at that. I'll
Yeah.
say that we have greater need, and certainly, as we move forward, we do anticipate over the next 10 years, we will need to be adding more seats. I cannot forecast that. That is, we have the bond referendum that was approved in 2022.
Right. But that number includes funded increases in seats.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So even though, again, by 2033 across different regions, you have in the central region much more stress, but overall we're pretty close to what the projections would say we'd need, right? To be at 100% capacity or utilization.
Well, I think we want to clarify there that the optimal number where we need to be at is about 85%. So what happens is that's for, let's take it Northern Durham, for example. That's all 8 elementary schools, that all of them will be past full. All of them. So I can change boundaries and I can cap a school and bring students to the next school, but all of them will be over capacity.
So your goal that at DPS utilization goal is like 85%.
85 to 90%. After 90%, we have an asterisk and we need to have a plan. Right. So one of the challenges when they opened Creekside is that we had, anytime you open a school and you have mobile trailers out front or out back, right? You better have a plan, a facility master plan to address that. And being candid and transparent, that is part of today, is that we have not had the comprehensive conversation, just as we were discussing with all of our facilities that include even administrative. Many of my staff work in mobile trailers, right? Yep.
That's helpful. I guess my question still remains, and we talked about this at the joint city county meeting. So I absolutely understand that the growth is driving these numbers, right? The number of kids that are coming. But I think that the notion that somehow residential growth is driving school overcrowding, I mean, this is a growth challenge, right? And so we can address that with transportation, issues. We can address it with tax policy. So this is one of many ways. And I get it that you sit at DPS, and so you're thinking about how development choices affect you there. But I just want to make sure we're clear that for the city council, we're trying to balance a whole number of things related to growth, one of which is development. But I think what I don't think is to me is logical is that like residential growth is driving this. I think growth is driving the challenge. We could look at residential developments and predict where students are going to be. We can also just look at growth projections for the county, right? So we know we're going to grow. We've been growing. So I want to make sure that the issue is not that, because I think you referenced sort of like choices, past choices, future choices. And I assume that means development choices, right? Rezonings. But when people come, they've got to either live somewhere or not, right? And so to me, again, the challenge is like growth. How do we manage that? One of them is how do we manage the increase in the school population, right? So I just want to make sure that I understand that. And I also want to make sure, I'm not quite sure beyond, sharing that we are making the community aware of what's happening, of the growth of students and growth of population. I want to understand the specific request of the council, because you've got some high level requests there, but like, what is it that we actually can do? I think Councilmember Baker had some good suggestions. Like, should we be asking for proffers for space for schools? That's a very tangible thing. But like, what is it that what's the best way the city council can help DPS? That's what I want to be clear about specifically. What can we do to help you all?
And we have 4 more hours, so I just want to make sure. Okay. Yeah. And thank you for bringing the comments to the question of what can you do to help? Is that the interpretive?
Yeah. Okay. Like, what's the specific ask for the city council?
Yeah. I think it's twofold. It's good. We intend, and with Director Young here, I certainly don't want to answer questions for her, but I would say at a high level, we intend to lead with transparency and accountability and integrity and say, with what we are knowing now, this is where we'll be in 10 years. To Councilmember Baker's question earlier, if there's a 5-year lag from knowing we need to build Miriam Massenburg because we're bringing in kids from mobile trailers at Hope Valley and otherwise into a brick and mortar permanent school. Remembering that we live in not only Tornado Alley, but also the Hurricane State. Right? Children in mobile classrooms when there is residential growth, which is very common all in throughout metropolitan Charlotte. Go to Cabarrus, Union counties, you'll see mobile villages, 150% utilization. My job is to make sure that we are prepared for the future with student safety and educational opportunity in mind. I certainly want to be consistent in that message and ensure that we've been proactive in communicating the marginal effect of choice of saying these decisions, whether it's a rezoning or it's a by right development, have occurred. This is what we're looking at for enrollment in the long term. We're bringing the best data in the country to our community to make sure we're clear-eyed about it. What it also means is that it's just that. It's having a transparent, consistent, and predictable conversation. Not that you see me again in 10 years or 20, right? But that we're consistently at the table every year, sharing what is the enrollment, what are our capacities, and what's on the table for us heading forward. So that is the ask, is quite literally to have staff representation and awareness of electeds of what is ahead of us, where we're at, and what are the implications for residential growth. And if we want to call that growth more broadly, that is framing, and that is for you all to take on. I would say it is not a bad thing, but it is a thing, and we need to be prepared for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. And I received this presentation at Joint City County. I think beyond the task force, I think what would be helpful, and I appreciate Councilmember Baker's question around, proffering of land. I feel like somebody tried to do that recently on one of our cases, maybe 751 South or something, and it got tricky. It ended up being trickier than we assumed. We were like, oh, this sounds great. And we were like, actually, this is more complicated. But I think the other piece is, I'm looking at, I think it was the high school one. Hold on, the high school slide. I have it in front of me. We can look at this and see that everything essentially in 10 years is overutilization, right? Like you're saying, except maybe Hillside, because you said, no, even Hillside, I can't remember what percentage you provided that once you hit a threshold, you start to 85. Yeah, I was looking at the current and not the 2033 to 34. So that's 10 years out, right? The utilization 2033 to 34. And then, yeah, on that slide, you can see every single one of our high schools is going to be over-enrolled essentially, right? I mean, clearly Riverside is already over-enrolled by quite a bit. So I grew up mostly in Charlotte. I definitely understand how we think that our growth here is bananas. I'm sorry, you didn't live in Southeast Charlotte. So I think I spent most of my elementary school years in a trailer, and many schools were built and they were already over-enrolled. So I think the thing that would be most useful, and this is really going to be staff to staff and doesn't actually involve the electeds, is if you already know that you're over-enrolled in the northern part of the county, where quite frankly, there isn't a ton of development, then as you're doing your master planning, where are the sites that make sense where we're going to need to potentially think about a school? And then as we get potential annexations, we know that, because if you're asking for that now, we're just flying blind, because I'm assuming that y'all do have that planning or you're getting there. You're going to be able to identify where is it, if you're looking at the eastern part of the county, that it would make sense to place a school. And so then as we are doing our work of land use and zoning cases, and to your point, some of it is by right, we have the necessary information. And I'm assuming that at some point y'all are going to be identifying, yeah, this would be a great parcel to build a school, or this part of the county needs a school. We know we're going to be over-enrolled. It's close to these other community amenities. It would be a great place for a school, because without that information, we're all just kind of, shooting in the dark. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Certainly. Did you want to respond or it looked like you were being pensive?
I was just gonna add, or acreage, because I think what I'm very clear on is when it's like over 50 acres or over 100 acres or over 200 acres, if there could be a school, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, centralized in that area, like there, just some gauge. I know there has to be, I know that there is language like this because I've seen it before in New Jersey, which is what I'm struggling with, so, yeah.
Please, Director.
Good afternoon. Just real quick. We are working closely with our partners at DPS to try and get like that very same menu of understanding where regionally, they may be looking for schools, because honestly, by the time it gets to you all, a proposal is already so far down the road. They've done their performance. They cannot carve off 50 acres at the time of rezoning. So staff needs to catch that when we're having pre-submittal meetings and concept meetings with folks. And we need to be sharing information then with applicants, because I do think that it is not, it's likely not feasible that someone would be able to carve that off when they are, that far along in the rezoning process. So that is something that's on our radar. We're working with them on. I just wanted to share that bit.
And then I have an additional follow-up thing, because thank you, I'm glad y'all are talking, but then also transportation. Because if we're ever going to do, like, we had a really great conversation just yesterday at JCCPC about transit opportunity, the transit opportunity zone. I'm assuming what a school looks like in that area may look real different. Maybe we don't want to prioritize, or we want to prioritize mass transit or walking or whatever. And so what are the standards? And what are the opportunities, and are the parcels potentially smaller? We're not looking for a 50-acre site because of where it is. And I know we're going to be doing that a lot with the UDO, but I guess my ask back is thank you. The task force doesn't involve council, thankfully not more work for us. And the flip of, I need staff at planning and transportation and the schools to do the thing that we're saying we want, and that's already reflected in our comp plan. If we're going to do 15-minute cities, yes, I actually believe in the community schools model. A school should be the center of a community. Public schools, let me rephrase that. Public schools should be the center of a community. Thank you.
And if I could just add to that, there's also a location in Fayetteville. It's the Bill Hefner Elementary School that I think was built with the development. And I'm not sure how they managed to do that, but I do know that it happened in North Carolina. So I'm just trying to pull up my Rolodex.
Thank you. Colleagues, anyone else? Director Palmer, thank you so much. I was very much looking forward to this conversation. Obviously, there are some legal barriers to our participation directly in the management of our schools, but your clients, your customers, our children, they're our most vulnerable and youngest residents and citizens. So everything we do impacts them on their way to the building, out of the building as well. In addition to not being able to levy an impact fee, we also can't do a moratorium on development as well. A lot of what we do, as you know, is manage outcomes. Something's going to go there. Whether when we say yay, it's a nay to something else. When we say nay, it's a yay to something else. Part of this, we used to call it having high-class problems. If DPS sucked, a lot of this wouldn't be an issue. When folk make a decision to move to our area, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Our robust economy, job opportunities, our cultural scene, our weather. And some of those folk are going to move whatever the condition of our public schools, because some of them have the means and they'll make a decision, well, my job is here, but I'm going to find some other options, if you know what I mean. So as our schools become more excellent, y'all are part of the reason why folk move here. They're part of that nexus of things that make our area so attractive. So it's like, it's almost kind of a self-feeding problem. It's a high-class problem to have. The fact that folk want to be here and in our schools. So I want to just, congratulate and keep lauding the job you're doing at you and your team, the whole DPS family, in educating our children and presenting a product that is so desirable that folk want to live here. for our schools, for our economy, for our culture, for the wonderful weather, for our climate, for our people, for our parks, for our trails. The Councilmember Riss earlier pointed about all of these factors that go into it. I do want to, encourage continued conversation. One of the things, if Durham were a state, Durham City is the state, then the Durham County is the federal government. And things like land banking and looking at where the schools need to be in the future are county level decisions. And I know they're making those kind of strategic decisions. And I think we definitely have to take school impact and other impacts into account when we make our zoning decisions. But it's the waters are fraught, as you know, with a lot of legal barriers and guardrails. But I think that I know for me personally that when we make these zoning decisions, a lot of the folk that are moving here and seek to move here have in many cases already made a decision that they want to be here and they're going to be here. And oftentimes when we say no to developments, folk with means, if they've already made a decision, well, I've got to live in Durham because of my job, I've got to be here. I'm just going to take my resources and put pressure on some other neighborhood in the city. Sometimes our no's are what drive the pressure in other areas in our city. So I say all that to say, and just a long answer, I say all that to say that our youngest residents, our youngest clients, if you will, students in DPS are always for in our mind. The parks that they use when school is over. God forbid if the worst should happen, the first responders who would have to get to those schools if the unimaginable happens. The safety of our streets as they're traversing to and from school is also, some of the things that we look at in making these decisions. So I hope that as the task force goes forward, that our voices will be included, not infringing upon the county's purview, but knowing full well the decisions we make in zoning incorporate all of these factors and without forecasting what the legal landscape is going to look like in our state moving forward, not New Jersey, in North Carolina moving forward. I hope that we will, and with our UDO rewrite, Councilmember Baker, I hope that every tool we can exploit, every avenue we can exploit as a council to accrue more power to us to make these decisions in a more holistic way will be so. If I can appeal to you personally, go ahead. Go ahead. I want to ask you a favor. Yeah, if I can, if you would just give our regards and our thanks to Dr. Lewis. I know I was unable to attend the official welcoming of him. My very first meeting when I got on council, 2 meetings. The first meeting was with the DPS superintendent, Dr. Mabanga, and then the president of Duke, who was nice enough to come over to City Hall. So it's kind of a thing when we get a new superintendent. If you would extend my greetings and congratulations to him and best wishes on behalf of the city. And I look forward to meeting him soon. You were going to say something.
Just a couple of summary remarks. I did want to bring it back to the recommendations, and we are intentional about being humble in the ask, which is that we intend to lead and bring together with a transparent conversation so that you all are aware as electeds what decisions are before you. And it is with humility and respect of their tough choices, whether it's rezoning or otherwise. A couple things just to, Councilmember Middleton, you brought me back to a few remembering points. Schools are where we vote. They're where we shelter when we are in danger. Right? They are the heart of our community in so many ways, not just physically, but we talk about having a time base anchor. Right? Hillside High School is nationally renowned for its excellence as a historic Black high school for now over 100 years. We are growing through growth challenges, but it is a first world problem of saying we're growing. And our project that I lead is called Growing Together. Internally to DPS, that means student assignment, our ambitions with equity and diversity, shorter ride times for students, but it also means as a community. It's an elastic framing to say, it's going to take all of us to get through this. We can, and we will. 1991 analysis of the merger feasibility by Liggett and Liggett, who came in from New York. Now, they might have been just writing this because we paid consultants, but they said Durham Public Schools and Durham City and County, if you bring this together, has more potential than any schools district in the country. Those are Dr. Lewis's very same opening vision and remarks for us here at Durham Public Schools, to be the premier urban education district in America. And we can do it. And we will need your help. Just lastly, and it is known that we have a school bus driver shortage. On the workforce development front, Durham Public Schools is the first large urban district in North Carolina to be authorized by DMV to recruit and train our own school bus drivers. So if you all or anyone at home viewing wants to drive with us, we need help. And 2, we are the first school system recipient from NCDOT's Safe Routes to School grant, which is roughly $400,000 between Durham Public Schools as well as Bike Durham and our community partners. So I name that to say we are doing everything we can. We're here very much with open hands and saying we can do great things together. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Councilmember, please.
Just in addition, and I've been trying to think about how to frame it, but I do want to, I want to seriously have the conversation about how land is used, and not just the humble way, but also in like the eminent domain way. Just acknowledging to your point about the sheltering and emergencies, those, I think Councilmember Caballero is being facetious, but it is really that you need these spaces to be centralized for people to get to. And so having a larger conversation, I don't know how it got missed in the UDO conversation, but I want to make sure that that is brought up to the top of the list as a priority. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, thank you. Dr. Palmer, thank you so much, sir, for a great presentation, and best wishes to you and your team. Talk again soon. All right, colleagues, our next presentation, item number 24, fiscal year 2023-2024 fourth quarter financial report. The Timster. Is your mic on?
It is
There it
now.
is, all right.
So while the technology is doing its thing, good afternoon. I am Tim Flora. I am the Director of Finance. Mayor Middleton, council members, I appreciate the opportunity to give the fourth quarter update. If I may just take a couple minutes or a few seconds of personal privilege, I would like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Middleton for speaking recently at or engaging with us at our summer conference, the North Carolina Government Finance Officers Association. We work very closely as the NCGFOA with the League of Municipalities, and as in your role as president of the board at the league, you came and addressed. I am on the board of the NCGFOA, and at a recent meeting, all of the other directors were very complimentary of your remarks, and almost, I think they phrased it as a stand-up routine. And so we're very appreciative of the support that you provided there.
Thank you so much, Tim. And you guys throw incredible parties. Just so you didn't say that part. Thank you.
We finance directors, while we may come across as rather dull, we can be rather exciting folks at times. So today, this is a joint presentation. This is our Q4 presentation, and this is a joint collaboration between the finance and budget departments. And so I would like to extend a very thank you to Director Reardon and her staff for all of the work that she has contributed to this presentation, as well as the finance staff. I will say we are the books are closed for FY24. We are still working through the process. We are still working through the audit. And so all the numbers you see here today are unaudited numbers. We are anticipating having everything completed by the requirement from the LGC, the October 31 deadline. And so what I will also say as we move forward, that I am a person who does not like surprises. And so fortunately, the financial results of FY 24, there were no surprises. Everything pretty much came in as we had anticipated. So we're very excited about that. For the general fund, let's just get right into it since we don't have much time. So for the general fund, one thing I will note is all departments came in under budget. So that's always good. One thing I will just point out here, just to show, you'll notice our Economic and Workforce Development Department has a pretty positive variance of $2.1 million. The percent of budget was 43%. A lot of that, what you see there is just incentives that were budgeted that were not needed or did not get tapped into. So just wanted to point that out as something to jump out. Really no big surprises. One thing I will just point out here, if you look down here on this line item, sometimes I know you know this is really more for the education of our residents as I'm giving this presentation. You notice that there is a negative number in a column of mostly positive numbers under the adjusted budget, and that is our indirect cost. And so just to highlight what that really is, that is the charges that we make to our enterprise funds for all of those G&A type expenses, the legal services, the financial services, the governing body as part of that, rents or the land that is, or rents that would, where we've provided facilities for that. And so those are the charges. That number does, that is not just a made up number. We actually work with a consultant to give us what those indirect costs are. And so those are offset and charged to our enterprise funds. If we look at the expenditures by class, we'll see that the personnel services had a variance of savings of $9.3 million, followed by operating expenditures of 6.4. And we'll jump here. Let me just jump to this. The revenues, it shows the total revenues have come in at $270 million, which is about $2.4 million. So I'm right down here. I'm looking at this number right there. So our revenues came in at a little over $270 million, which is $2.4 million over our budgeted revenue amount. For our total expenditures, our expenditures were more than the revenues. They came in at $287 million. So there is a negative net revenues use of fund balance of $16.8 million. I just want to point out that is planned for. That is exactly, there are, again, no surprises there. We budgeted more in expenditures than we did revenue. There was some surplus, so rightfully so. We used some of that appropriated fund balance or our reserves. And so to give you confidence that that number is a big number, but it is right where we need to be. And when we have always talked about that fund balance number of those expenditures for our fund balance reserves should be around 25%. We are really anticipating that we're going to be right where we need to be with that, which from my standpoint is good when we relay that to our rating agencies, is why we use that fund balance, because we also want to be very good stewards of our residents' taxpayer money. And so we try to use that money as efficiently and as effectively as possible and not have more than we need. We just like to have just enough. So just jump into some of the bigger revenue streams. So this is just some additional information on property taxes. You can see from 2021 to 2024, we've got those really steady increases in our property taxes. This is what we like about property taxes. It is a very stable revenue stream for us. It's very predictable. And so we like that. Whereas sometimes sales tax can be a little bit volatile. And so you can see from 21 to 24, the numbers sort of jump around. These are collections that you see up there through June 30th, because we do not have all of the sales tax revenue in yet. I think our last revenue payment comes in just a couple of days. I think within the next few days, we are fully expecting the sales tax revenues to come in on budget at $99 million, almost $100 million. And so you'll notice in the prior year, it was $10.7 million over budget. That was a conscious decision that is, again, absolutely what we had planned to do, is because sales tax was so volatile and in prior years, we weren't really sure what it was going to shake out to be because of the COVID situation. We had some pretty big surpluses. We've gotten much more precise in our budgeting. And so everything is exactly as we had anticipated. So just again, on the end of year projections, total budget, $2.5 million over budget this year. Last year, $11.1 million of that. But of that 11.1, $10.7 million was the sales tax. Property taxes, again, are very steady. $1 million under budget on the utility franchise taxes. Again, people aren't using cable and the landline telephones like they used to be. And so those revenue streams are on the steady decline. No surprises there. If we just looked at the major revenue comparisons, so sorry, that is a FY 2020 to 2024 comparison, not just a 22-23 comparison. But if you look, there's no surprises in that chart. All of our revenues, steady growth. If you look at the bottom line, you can see every year over year, we're having very steady growth in our revenues. Again, the only outlier is the utility franchise tax, which has been going negative for us. I like this chart. This is a multi-year comparison of our revenues and expenses trends. And so again, if you see that, you see the steady growth in revenues and expenditures. I will just point out where we talked about before where we were using reserves. So you see our revenues are less than our expenditures for this year, fully anticipated. Normally, it's the other way around, but it is just to show you that it's not unusual. You'll also see in 2020 where we had that same situation. So again, it's just a matter of managing our financial resources, trying to keep the reserves where they need to be. And so none of this stuff is unexpected. Quickly into our enterprise funds. Again, we're right where we should be, or maybe not right where we should be in all cases, but we are right where we anticipated we would be. And so water and sewer, again, revenues are slightly under budget. Just better. They do a really great job with projecting their revenues, and they do a great job of showing us, I think, the user fees projections that they have. Expenditures are under budget, $2.6 million. There's a positive budget variance of $2.5 million. If we jump down here, you see again, there's a negative $3.2 million again. That was anticipated, so they've used their reserves in the appropriate way there, but we did have a positive budget variance of $2.5 million. The Transit Operations Fund, they're projected to be under budget by $1.3 million. So that's good. Positive budget variance of $2 million. The Transit Operations Fund is supported somewhat by the 3.75 tax rate. So there is some public funding that goes into that. They are exceeding collections in several categories, but with a net revenues of $783,000. But I will say of that $783,000, almost $750,000 of that is interest earnings. And so if I were to point out here, again, they have a negative net assets of $7.1 million, positive budget variance of $2 million. But the fact that they have $750,000 in added interest income means they have a very healthy fund balance. And so again, all of this is planned for and anticipated. Solid Waste Fund, their total revenues collected are $32.9 million, which is up $9.1 million from the same time last year. And so they have operating revenues projected at $8.7 million, which is about $366,000 under budget, leading to an overall positive revenue variance of $52,000. So it's running pretty tightly. We'll say for the Solid Waste Fund, we have used some of their fund balance. This is an operation that we're keeping a close eye on. There are not many reserves in that fund, and so we are keeping a very close eye on those operations. But again, no surprises there. The Stormwater Fund, total revenues are projected to be $27.6 million or $4.8 million over the budget. Projected expenditures are expected to be under budget by $1.3 million for an overall budget variance of $6.2 million. We still anticipate using fund balance and from that fund. What I will say is, if I could draw your attention down here, we cash fund, pay-go fund, a lot of their capital projects. And so you'll see that transfers to other funds down there of $13.8 million. Historically, we've always been cash funding a lot of their projects. Because their fund balance now, the reserves are now getting lower. We are starting to look at, as we look at their cash flow models, we will start looking at now debt funding some of their cash, some of their projects in the future, as opposed to just the pay-go. The parking fund is at the end of the year, the parking fund received 102% of budgeted revenues, ending the year with total revenues of $7.1 million. Conversely, the fund spent only 92% of budgeted expenditures, ending the year with expenditures of $7.8 million. What I would say with the parking fund is a victim of supply and demand. Unfortunately, demand these days for parking during the day is not as great, a lot because of the remote working. And so unfortunately, the fund does have a cash deficit of $1.9 million, and we continue to see that deficit to continue by about almost $767,000 this year. And so we do carry that on our books as a due to other funds. So basically what we have is our other enterprise funds are sort of loaning the parking fund money to offset that. And so no concerns other than the fact is we just have lots of capacity that we would certainly like to see used. Other enterprise funds, the ballpark fund doing very well. The projected overall budget variance of $347,000, and our DPAC fund again is looking to have an overall positive budget variance at $2.9 million, with their net revenues being somewhere about $2.3 million. So we're in really good shape there. So that's very quickly the run of the numbers. More than happy to answer any questions, but I also would like to point out that the full financial report can be found online. We encourage folks on there because there is a very extensive, I think it's 100 some pages of financial information. And so in addition to the financial information, you'll see information on our investment portfolio, our claims and contract information, our planned debt issuances, lots of updates on our CIP projects. And a new report that has been on there since the last is the General Services Real Estate Division report.
And it is really great reading too. Thank you. Tim, thank you so much for a great report. Colleagues, any questions or comments? We're in the black. Go ahead.
Just one question about the, I know water and sewer is an important part of our budget and the services we provide to the city. So they had a $2.1 million short of the budget based on, sounds like vacancies. And so Don, Mr. Greeley's not here, but I'm just kind of want to make sure that those vacancies, obviously we care about the quality and the sort of accessibility of our water. Just want to make, I don't know if there's any kind of concern about if they're.
I think their turnover, their vacancy rate is very consistent as in prior years. I mean, it is a big department. They have lots of vacancies, but they also have lots of people that can cover for those. So I do not.
We'll make sure we have the staff to do the important work they're doing. So yeah, we're happy to spend that money because it's an important part of our.
Absolutely. And I feel confident that I could speak for Director Greeley when and say that they have all the bases covered.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Councilmember. Colleagues, anyone else? All right, Mr. Director, good to see you as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great report. Colleagues, our final presentation this afternoon, item number 26, is presentation on Paratransit Improvement Services Study.
Okay. There we go. Yep. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Fahey. I'm the Mobility Services Manager with the Transportation Department. I actually have the pleasure of presenting this. This has actually been a project that's been very personal for me, and I've really enjoyed the past year working on. So I'm here to provide an update today on the recommendations and findings from our Paratransit Improvement Services Study. There we go. So to begin with, it'll be a quick overview of the Go Durham Access Program, reasons for the study, some findings and recommendations, and key areas of the study. However, before we begin, this study really was rooted in the customer experience, and that was the focus. And so it would not have been possible without the dedication of our task force members that you see here. I would also like to thank our contractor, We Drive You, formerly known as National Express Transit, as well as our consultant, Benish, that facilitated this study. So the background of the Go Durham Access service. Go Durham Access is the coordinated demand response service for the city and county. Access provides ADA paratransit service anywhere within the city of Durham, but it also provides service to county residents who are age 60 or older, have a disability, or reside in the rural areas of the county. The service is operated by our private contractor, We Drive You. In June 23, this council assigned the contract from Go Triangle to the city, and the Mobility Services Division now manages the contract. Oh, sorry, go back, Sean. In fiscal year 24, it's actually just quite amazing what we saw with growth, but there were also some immediate benefits we saw from the work of the task force. So we actually provided just over 160,000 trips last fiscal year, and that's about 18% higher than the previous year. However, at the same time, we saw a 9% increase in on-time performance, and our cost per trip remained relatively unchanged. So the study came about as Go Durham emerged from the pandemic. The service faced a shortage of operators, and on-time performance was significantly below our target of 95%. And resulting in customers consistently arriving late to their important healthcare appointments, work, recreational, or shopping destinations. Customers also expressed the need to improve service throughout the public engagement of the Durham County Transit Plan, as well as the Regional Human Services Coordinated Plan. So in June of last year, the city and county created the Paratransit Task Force, and thanks to funding from the Durham County Transit Plan, we contracted with Benish to facilitate this study. The key goals were to identify and improve the communications and customer experience, improve upon other key performance indicators, identify opportunities of a consolidated service delivery model, which I'll elaborate on further, as well as looking at opportunities for travel training and mobility management to expand education services for residents. Early in the study, we identified several areas and issues to address the improve the customer experience. That includes improving call center contact or interaction between customers and the call center that Go Durham Access operates. Improving trip reminder and notifications. We were seeing a very large number of no-shows and cancellations, a lot of which could have been solved by, prior day reminders to customers given the opportunity to cancel a trip, but also real-time notifications, estimated arrival times of their vehicle. Also trying to encourage riders to utilize self-service trip tools. And finally, to improve clarity and readability of the methods in which we reach riders and human service agencies. So one of those primary improvements actually
just occurred about a month ago. So in late July, Go Durham Access went live with a new reservations and scheduling platform from Spare Labs. The new system provides online eligibility applications and electronic management of those applications. Prior to that, it was still a pencil and paper activity. Also provides rider web interface and apps to allow customers to book and manage their trips, as well as reminders, notifications, and real-time arrival estimates. Finally, one that I actually just shared with Director Egan during this meeting, we actually have real-time ratings where riders can rate their experience. So I actually just received a positive review from a customer that they submitted 2 minutes prior. So it's great to really close that feedback loop. The other area we looked at was a consolidated service delivery model. This was explored as a way to support different trip types using multiple service providers to allow the system to become more flexible in responding to peak demand periods. The key goals we identified were to prioritize the Go Durham bus service options when available, to optimize the customer's experience, minimize the overall trip cost, maximize the productivity, and of course, to provide excellent service, including same-day reservations. It's kind of archaic to believe that we were not providing same-day reservations. Go Durham Access, you have up to 2 weeks in advance to the day before to reserve a trip. But we weren't at and we still are not 100% there, but we were not at a place where we could offer that capacity to provide that level of service. Microtransit will actually be one of the services that will become a reality by integrating this new platform. So up until June 2024, Go Triangle sponsored the microtransit pilot, which was funded by the Durham County Transit Plan in East and North Durham zones. And that was operated by Lyft. Thanks to continued funding in the FY25 Durham County Transit Work Plan, Go Durham Access will resume the pilot in October, and this will be using Go Durham Access vehicles. Microtransit pilot will be fare-free to be consistent with our other transit services in Durham. Since the final report that you received with this presentation was completed in June, we obviously conducted additional planning and analysis. The service is expected to provide just over 61,000 trips in FY25. But by using a different cost model, as well as greater software capabilities that are now available, the service is forecasted to be within budget and also provides a sustainable model for future years. We also explored travel training and mobility management as a primary recommendation that was provided in the Human Services Coordinated Plan. And it's also a key area that we heard from riders and other stakeholders. Most travel training programs assist users with riding the bus service as a new rider or as an experienced rider that's new to the area, or as a certified ADA paratransit user looking to expand their mobility options. So most programs consist of 4 steps that you see here. That is the pre-training, training, post-training, and monitoring and assessment. After the pre-training is complete, most agencies will conduct the training in a standard format. The study provided best practices, pros and cons for the following formats. The one-on-one field training, which allowed the practice riding the bus under supervision or the access vehicle, leads to a more personalized experience. Group field training, which gives the opportunity to train multiple people at a time. This may be a preferred practice when the agency does not have an employee dedicated. And classroom training, which is a combination with either individual or group field training. It's a good way to provide background information in a group setting. The task force will be working with key stakeholders to develop the necessary components for a travel training mobility management program that will be included in the scope of work in procuring the next Go Durham Access Management Operations and Maintenance Agreement, which will go into effect September 1st of next year. So overall, the future is bright. The city and the county and task force are thrilled to continue this critical work. Some of the key milestones that you see on the slide we have obviously implemented a new scheduling reservation system. Also to continue improving the communication and the customer experience, implementing the microtransit program in October. Also looking at building framework for a transit advisory committee in fiscal year 25. Finally, we actually are accepting proposals right now for consulting services to assist us with procuring the next Go Durham Access contract. So we'll be taking an approach similar to what we did with the Go Durham Mixed Route contract in procuring. Finally, also really to look at expanding our third-party operators by providing a consolidated model where we incorporate additional providers into the system. Almost for the customer, we're able to handle those peak. And then finally, incorporating travel training and mobility management options into the next procurement as well. So I would like to end on a high note. Actually, it's good to see real progress that is being made, but this is personally one of the, yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's actually been one of the personally rewarding project for me. I actually have a family member that at 49 went from perfectly fine to completely disabled and needing care and going through the process for her in Wake County to actually get certified and be able to take the trip she needs. It's been very difficult. So being able to work with our customers too and see day in and day out what they experience has just been a pleasure. And I'll end it on a high note that this is actually a quote from Ed Rizzuto, who's on our BPAC, our task force, but also a Go Durham Access rider. It's good to see that real progress is being made with regard to modernizing and improving the Go Durham Access service. By enlisting participation and perspectives of members of the community who rely on the service, the process and outcomes are certainly better informed and more meaningful. Continuing the work to improve Go Durham Access service in Durham will expand opportunities for the city and county residents living with disabilities, and this will make Durham a better place to live for everyone. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Councilmember Rist.
Yeah. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Fay. I should say, yeah, I'm on BPAC with Ed. And he's an incredible advocate.
Yes.
He's also direct and honest. So like that feedback from Ed is really good because he'll be honest with, how he's feeling, what he thinks the service is like. So that's great endorsement of your work. I just had a question. Could you remind me of the microtransit? Like, what are the options there in that microtransit service? Like, what are we talking about? Like,
Sure.
what are the modes?
So the microtransit pilot as it is currently is really what you as an area to serve transit deserts. So these are areas that are not dense enough or do not offer the opportunity to provide a 40-foot bus. So these are areas where someone can travel anywhere within the zone. A lot of times it may be to shopping, it could also be to connect to our service. So example, in the North Durham zone to connect to the Horton Roxborough area or to Duke Regional to connect to the Route 4. And so it was really connecting people to be able to travel throughout Durham. And the previous program really just allowed travel within the zone and did run into some budget issues because it was very open and very few restrictions. The new platform we have enables us to create rules to really make sure we have a clamp on that. So for example, if there is a fixed route service, a Go Durham bus service, that is within a quarter mile of the person's origin and destination in the zone, then they're given the choice to take the bus. We could also go a level beyond that just because they're close to a bus stop, what if the service doesn't come for an hour? So we can also have that component in there to say, okay, if the bus is coming within the next 30 minutes, they get the bus option. If not, they get both options. So it allows us to control. More importantly, it actually allows us what we would say commingle trips. So people who are riding as a Go Durham Access ADA paratransit rider, and then someone who's taking a microtransit trip or someone taking a county funded trip, those can all be within the same vehicle, still providing the level of service with trip time and making sure that it is at below 30 minutes, that still is handled. And then all the funding and how it's distributed is now administer that in one system, which was a big difficulty in the past.
What are isn't this in some cases like Uber or Lyft or like a third-party vendor? So who are the different vendors that are providing that micro mobility?
Sure. So ours is actually going to be Go Durham Access. So as part of our contract amendment that came through council a few months ago, our contractor, We Drive You, will be primarily operating the service. We are looking at potential of incorporating another provider that is similar to Uber or Lyft. But they actually have their own pool of drivers using their own vehicles, but they we have the ability to use them for overflow. But right now, we don't anticipate that.
So we drive you, but it's essentially like the individual vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. But instead of the one-on-one trips where someone gets on, our goal was to pool rides and commingle. It's efficient and it's more cost effective.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. And I appreciate, I think, I just want to thank you for your many, many years of service. I remember when I was on the Durham County Transportation Advisory Committee that you were a very good resource in trying to figure out how to get folks on buses and throughout the city and the county. I did want to just kind of make sure that we mention, I know this slides didn't really talk about the funding resources that you have or don't have. I know that there were some state and federal dollars that went away. And so this commingling is really a necessity more than anything.
It is a necessity, yes. We are, so through our ILA with Durham County provides funding for trips. One is through state funding through ROPE funds, which are for elderly disabled, also for rural general public, and some workforce opportunities, which are more short term. And then the Durham County Transit Plan actually funds a fair amount as well for the county. But then on the federal side, in the past, we've used some federal formula funds. Our latest application, we're focusing that on capital to replace vehicles. But yes, that is always a constant concern. And the old adage in transit, which we're really trying to get that mentality out, is get everybody on the bus because it's so much cheaper. But that may not be what works best for our customer or our residents. So our goal is to find that happy medium where we provide quality service, but we can still keep that cost in check.
Thank you. And I will say, as a sibling, my sibling passed away, but she was very dependent on rides. And so to get to doctor's appointments, from doctor's appointments, is very different than just getting on a bus that runs every hour or every 10, 30, or 40 minutes. There's a different need, especially if you're differently abled or visually unable. I mean, this is a more equitable way to look at how folks need transportation when they are not in a car. And so I appreciate the way that you've presented it, and I appreciate the way that we're moving forward with this microtransit access program. And I look forward to the Transportation Advisory Board, and I'm going to make a very strong request that the Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities is heavily involved in that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so many things, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, anyone else? Ms. Fahey, thank you so much. Let me say your personal zeal for this work is infectious. No, it really is. I mean, this isn't the sexy part of government work, but this is the part that kind of makes coming to this building and doing what we do really worth it when you see this kind of impact. Some of the best conversations I've had was waiting on some Sunday afternoons after church for the access van to come and pick up some of our elders and stand there waiting with them to come, and had some really good conversations. So I want to thank you so much for this really, really important work. There was an item on our agenda, on our consent agenda, for 7 new light vehicles for Access Durham. And my question, this might be to staff as well. Is that representing replacing aging vehicles or an augmentation of our capabilities?
That's correct. It's simply replacing aging vehicles.
Yeah. What is our fleet strength now? What just a sense of how many? What's our fleet strength?
Our fleet is actually fairly strong. So we have 53 light transit vehicles now. They're all 20 to 22 foot light transit vehicles, all lift equipped, with the ability to handle 2 oversized chairs or scooters, and also to be able to seat 12. So that really gives us the flexibility to where we need to go. Our ultimate goal is, unlike with fixed route or the bus service, where as we expand service, we're going to add more fleet. Our goal is to keep that fleet the same or even possibly decrease it over the next 5 years by going to more of a model where we're incorporating other service providers, and even possibility. So we also administer the passenger vehicle for hire ordinance. You know, we only have 8 registered taxi operators now in the city, and they are looking for opportunities. And this is a great opportunity to potentially get them on board to operate service for access.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is a great, I think, way to bring the day to an end with this presentation on this
Thank
great
you.
work. Thank you so much. Best regards to your team. Thank you, Director Egan. Always good to see you. Congratulations on the proclamation earlier today again as well.
I love the pedestrian-friendly signs. So.
Always. All right, colleagues, that brings us to the end of our published agenda. I'm going to ask the clerk for a report in a minute. And then Beverly, I see you over there. I'm going to impose upon you, if you would, to just remind us about Neighborhood College tonight. I know we've all been invited to that. So if any of our colleagues can get by there. But at this time, Madam Clerk, will receive your report.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, and good evening, Council. The Council nominated the following persons to its boards, committees, commissions, and task forces. Trevay M. Willis to the Durham Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission in the category of Public Transit, Paratransit. Zora H. Lent, Durham City County Environmental Affairs Board in the category of Youth. James T. Ham and Victor G. Geraldo to the Mayor's Hispanic Latino Committee, regular members, and Brian J. Rodriguez Sanchez to the Mayor's Hispanic Latino Committee as a youth member. And finally, William B. Clark to the Durham Housing Authority Board of Commissioners in the category of Finance, Development, and Real Estate Management. That's the end of the report.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I think there's something going on with your mic. Before we settle the agenda, I'm going to ask Beverly Thompson, if you would just give us a little primer on what's going on tonight with Neighborhood College.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So glad to see you. And tonight is the first night for Durham Neighborhood College. It is one of the most popular things that we do all year because it involves residents who actually have to sign up to participate. Tonight, we will welcome about 24 residents, I believe, who have signed up for the program, and they all have applied. So they know, what they're getting into for the next 7 weeks. So tonight, it will be our first official welcome to everybody. And tonight we are going to have, and not the mayor who's away, but Mayor Pro Tem Mark Anthony Middleton, along with City Manager Wanda Page and County Manager Ms. Sowell, Dr. Sowell, and also someone else, I can't remember who else, Nida Alam, who's going to welcome on behalf of the county. So tonight they're just going to get a full interactive kind of session where they can ask questions and get an overview of what the city does and what the county does. And then the next few weeks on the 7th at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, we have special programming that we've been working on for the last, I say 6 months, so that they can learn all about special activities within their local government.
So they meet here in this room, or where do they meet?
No, they're going to meet over at the Durham County Administration Room.
Awesome. And I believe the
Administration building, rather, on the 4th floor. And you're welcome to join us.
I think they got food, y'all.
We have food.
That's why I wanted you to make the announcement. Thank you so much.
All right, thank
Looking
you.
forward. Madam Manager, I think we're ready to settle the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Members of council, I have for your consent agenda, items 1 through 22, and GBA public hearings, items 27 through 30. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'll entertain a motion to settle.
Second.
I hear a motion second. All in favor will indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, colleagues, man, thank you for a great meeting, really substantive meeting, great conversation. And thank you all for your input and engagement today. With that, it is September 5th, 4:44 p.m. I'm officially declaring this meeting adjourned. May God bless Durham. Thank y'all.